Call this meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
There's 10 people there.
Trustee Polly,
Present.
trustee Lappin,
Here.
clerk Palovich here, treasurer Ellery Summers. Here. Trustee Kroll,
Here.
trustee Reiner,
Here.
supervisor Skibby.
Here. Okay. Tonight's purpose of the meeting is a public input session. This is an opportunity to ask questions of not only the board, but also our guests. We have with us this evening, Mayor Walagora, Chief Forbush, and Deputy Chief Edmonds. I will go over the rules of participation. Tonight, we will start with the questions and comments of individuals that are here in person. We will then move to anybody that is online to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. We'll start with a 3-minute process that we've always had. And if time allows, we'll offer a second opportunity. If questions have been answered and duplicate comments or questions come before the board or the guests of the board, I will quickly ask you to address another question or a comment if it's already been addressed appropriately. With that being said, the purpose here tonight is for public input. I appreciate everybody's attendance. We ask that everybody remain professional and courteous of not only the board and our guests. With that being said,
Right here.
yes. We'll move forward to the adoption of the purpose of the meeting, which is a public input session. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion to approve the agenda. It's been moved and supported. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose the same. Okay. The podium is open. And I will state once before you go, Ms. Twite, anybody that is online, if you please raise your hand, that way we can actually put in order the sequence of people's participation so that we can answer you in order that you've reached out. Thank you very much. Ms. Twite.
My name is Marie Twite. I live at 4165 Turkey Road, Alpena, Michigan. And as you all know, I was very instrumental with the fire department. I operated it for approximately 20 years. And we utilized funds that were in the township. The only time we asked for a millage was once. And I think this board's already had 2. And so I'm really concerned about what's going on. I feel like you're giving our township fire department away. And I get it that the city could run it. They've ran their own for a lot of years, but I can remember when I took over, we used to have a lot of issues and problems. We had a gentleman that died right down the road here because we did not do medical. We didn't provide that, but the board finally did. And I'm glad they did because we've saved a lot of lives. Our township is a large township. And I can remember times when the city got calls that they told the patient to call it a taxi cab to take them when we weren't as cooperative with each other. And I believe over the years that Alpena Township, the city, and all the outlying districts are very cooperative. We've always had agreements. And but there are some concerns that I have. I understand that you basically are holding this public session in my mind after the fact. You already have offered to the city an agreement. But I'm wondering if you have asked or have thought about what it will cost for those buildings that you're going to allow the city to utilize. are those costs factored in? And if they are, what are they? We need to understand that as township taxpayers. Who's paying the upkeep on them? Who is paying for the electricity, the utilizations of those buildings? And also the same thing with the vehicles. You just passed a millage to be able to get a new ambulance and to get other things for our fire department. Then you turn around and you look to give it away. It's like, what kind of government is that? What kind of government sits here and looks at that? And you know what? I've been looking at what's going on, and we've lost almost all the services that we used to have. We did a lot of grants. How do you think Alpena Township made it? We didn't get as much millage as you get today. We never did. Actually, when I first got elected, John Engler was the governor of Michigan, and he removed the constitutional funding that we used to get from them. So I wish this board would relook at it. And if not, then the township board members could go back to, I think Mr. If I was correct in watching the meeting, Mr. Kroll said, that the elected officials could go back to part-time. And that's what they were. They were part-time. And when they got the fire department, that everything went full-time. And outside contracts were pursued by the supervisor. And pardon? Anyway, the difference in having our own station rather than the cities is a difference between 5 minutes and 15 to 20 minutes. I laid in my back porch and our department got there, but because the services were already being eliminated by Alpena Township, they couldn't touch me till the city got there. I mean, they could, I'm sorry, but that already happened here when you
Ms.
eliminated
Dwight,
some.
Your time is.
Pardon?
up. Your time is up. but
Okay.
You'll probably have enough. time.
Well, and I do believe that the tax burden is, pardon what?
Well, I'll move the one flag that's on the podium. It's just impeding vision.
Oh,
Sorry.
thanks, because it's a little distracting.
It is to me too.
I'm dodging, so I'm using up time dodging. But our contracts were never fully, our fire department was never, ever fully done. We used grant money and whatever we could. So I would suggest that the board revisit that.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Dwight. There is, because this is a Q&A format as well, some of the statements that I'll address that I feel that your comment that we are giving up our essential services. We haven't, to go back, we are following what this board has always said, that we would have a public input session. It's not after the fact. There have been exchanges with the city. That is a fact. But to say that we have given up our essential services, we've actually contracted with a company for water department. We still do those same services. We're just doing it under professional guidance of a professional contracted firm that runs water and wastewater. So we're still providing the same services. Now, do we directly hire employees? No. Is that in that context, is that how the conclusion is that we've given up service? So we're still providing that, I guess. Are there any other?
Yeah, I'd like to
rebuttals
speak to the additional costs. From my estimate, going through the ad hoc committee that we formed, there's probably at least $150,000 of extra costs that are gonna come for snow plowing and all that other stuff. So when this deal is signed at 400,000, it's really gonna be 550,000.
Anybody else from the board?
Well, one of the things that I keep saying, and I imagine most of the people here have already heard it said, is that we're not giving anything away. We're looking at the possibility of a contract for at least equal or better services. And we've negotiated that contract fortunately or unfortunately, for very publicly. And the contract has gone back and forth 2 or 3 times. And we have it worked to the point where I think at least some of us feel it's an acceptable contract. In terms of what Trustee Kroll said, in terms of costs, I don't have that belief. I will tell you that the cost of maintaining the building is part of what we've always had to do. And we're going to continue to do that. And it's been the general fund cost. It's not going to be an increased cost. It's just what is there. And so those things are still there that were there. But the ad hoc committee came back to us with a budget of a minimum of 800,000, which I felt was not enough to reconstruct, and I mean reconstruct this fire department, because we didn't give it away, it left. And these people got different jobs, better jobs, presumably elsewhere. And many of them are with the city. In terms of response time, I wanted to respond to that a little bit. We still intend to have, we believe we'll have under this contract, hopefully even bigger and better at some point, a paid on call staff that can respond from their homes just like they do now. Now, some may choose not to be part of that are in place now. That's their choice. That was the same as the choice that others made a few months ago when they left this department to go elsewhere. So if you look at the practicalities of trying to reconstruct this department against the services that we can get by not trying to reduplicate the wheel and cooperate with the city and have them provide these services, right now it looks like a very feasible opportunity, both for not only the cost of it compared to the budget that it would take to rebuild this department, which I think is about 3 times what this contract would be. And and it's going to take time to reconstitute this department. And we've already seen that. We've gone through something like, you tell me if I'm wrong with the numbers, but something like 15 candidates. We've got down to 2. 15 candidates to come into our department. They're hard to find. And most of them are not experienced. They need the training to get them up to speed, even though, I mean, from my experience, I went to college and then a postgraduate degree. But most of the training and learning I got was after I got out. And so the education alone isn't all that, it isn't everything. It takes hands-on experience to do the jobs that we learn to do. And so right now we have a contract for 400,000, a proposed budget of 800,000, and I believe a 1.2 million realistic budget to run this department and put it up to the level that it needs to be professional. We've never had a paramedic in our stations. Tell me, well, they're going to argue with that. We had EMTs.
No, you had
Yeah. I was here. I've been going to these meetings for probably now five years or more. I was there when you were there, going to the meeting. So I guess it's more than 5. You used to ask me why I came. But the point is that this has to be something that we look at, because the costs are high, and the services that we can get with 2 people at each station, I think are equal or better. And so that's kind of where the contract evolution came from, was looking at how do we rebuild this, or how do we find something that's as good or better. That's where we're at.
Are there any other?
I just
Comments?
want to clarify for Russ
Yeah.
that we do have paramedics on staff. Our licensing.
Our license is not.
Is
yeah,
not
that's-
for
that's- yeah,
paramedics.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
that limits what they can do
Right,
at a scene.
right.
But we do have paramedics.
And we would have to have,
We'd have to upgrade our license.
right, and have a full staff of
Right.
paramedics, right?
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
Yeah.
The city currently has that contract with the county, so all residents pay through that millage for that service.
That is true. It's a question of then why would we even need those people in our station? You know, that's-
Well, we're taking away a service from our citizens. If we were to respond and we'd have 4 people as we do it now, whereas we're only gonna have 2 if they're manning our station. We're actually losing a service.
Well, for the time, we will continue. Is there anybody else on the board that had anything in rebuttal to Ms. Twice? I see that the mayor.
I'm not on your board.
Well-
I just, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but Marie asked a couple questions. I wondered.
Still not on. Hold it for, yeah, there you go.
Maria had asked a couple questions about the buildings, the maintenance of the buildings, the utilities and things. And I just, if you wouldn't mind, most of that stuff is covered in the contract. And if she hadn't had an opportunity to read it, if you could just cover that really quick, that way,
Yeah.
that way anybody else that's questioning that same thing will know.
Do you need a copy of the contract?
And there are hard copies of the draft as it stands on the shelf. I did.
Facilities right here.
But yes, to address that question, it would be the facilities, apparatus, and vehicles and equipment under this potential contract would fall as a $1 equipment lease for a year. And then any of the, I'll wait for people to sit down. I was just gonna wait for people to kind of get seated again before I. Stations, I'll just actually read the entire section, just to keep it clear. Under section 5, subsection A, stations. This township will, at its expense, maintain all townships fire stations for the use of city pursuant to this agreement. City fire staff shall have unrestricted use of Southside Station and use of Northside Station restricted solely to the fire station areas for the purposes of operating fire and emergency services. The city shall lease township-owned vehicles and buildings, including furnishings and equipment, for $1 per year, which shall be memorialized in writing via separate instrument. The township shall maintain insurance and provide building and grounds maintenance, including snow plowing, lawn care, and repair as needed. Incidental cleaning and small repairs under $100 shall be handled by city personnel. But going back to the board or members of city, to Ms. White's comments, if anybody had a rebuttal, that would be the time.
Yes, sir. I would like to mention going on in paragraph B of that same section under apparatus, vehicles, and equipment, the township fire apparatus, and fire vehicles will be repaired and maintained by city mechanics at city expense whenever possible, unless a specific vehicle is deemed to be not roadworthy and the task force addresses that when the time comes. One of the advantages that we've seen. So we have an excellent mechanic staff that really have tremendous expertise in diesel mechanics. So for our fire apparatus, that has worked out really, really well for us, not only in terms of timing to be available when the repair is needed, but also in cost effectiveness. When we used an outside contractor, when we had to use an outside contractor, which is rare, it's very expensive per hour. Using city staff, it's much less expensive, so there's an economy of scale, and those same mechanics address the entire fleet. I think that's an important point to know, because while the buildings are yours and you have to maintain them, the vehicles are yours, but we're going to maintain them, and we'll be able to do it more cost effectively in the process, but it will be at our expense.
Thank you, Chief. Any other rebuttals to the first comment or question? If not, I mean, that way, I just want to have opportunities to, if there is a rebuttal, but the podium is open for.
Right, good evening. Dr. Ken Gimbel, 2276 Maple Grove Road. So mine will be pretty short, but it's about the fiscal responsibility. Very important. With that said, I'm very surprised that you guys don't have a heightened level of concern of entering into an agreement with the city on the fire department with the pending litigation of the water that's been going on for nearly a decade. We spent at least $1 million of our taxpayer money, right? And it would seem like that's high risk. And I don't think that the partnership with them, and I love fire department and police, we support my kids fundraise for both. So it's not an issue with the fire department of the city. It's more of the issue going on between the two. And it seems reckless to join into a financial partnership with them without that being solved. And as a board of trustees, it seems like you should be laser focused on a resolution for that issue. You're not kicking that can down the road for another 3 years, which then that's another opportunity to renegotiate this deal that we're putting in place, potentially, without that being solved. Now, I don't know what your legal counsel or our legal counsel that we're paying for through the tax money is suggesting to do, but I would be very surprised if they said it's a great idea to enter into an agreement with the people that you've been suing or having a litigation with, right? So the next part of the point comes into, we had a millage in 2018 for the fire department. And that goes to, did you guys not understand the budget that was required to support the fire department? That's your job. So we passed a millage in 2018, and literally 2 months or 2 years and 2 months after that, 2 days after an election, we need to disband our fire department, merge it with another fire department, give them the assets. It just doesn't make sense, and it seems very unethical. On top of it, most of my profession goes in change management. I'm a huge advocate of making things better, improving things of that nature. Communication is the key part of that. To slide that in 2 days after an election seems very unethical. So I think logically, I mean, one of my main points is with the water litigation going on, it seems reckless and irresponsible to join into a partnership with the city over the fire department. Resolve that and then talk about it. But don't have that open, because we're still paying on that, which is, you're talking about budget issues. Until you solve that, the meter's rolling on those costs. So those are the main points I have. I don't know if I'm done. I appreciate your time. So.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, one, because I know that this is going to be a commonality, and I want to address it because I think it would just continuously pop up, and ethics. Yes, in retrospect, probably not the best timing. But I will make this very well known, and I think this entire board would reiterate this. I've asked the board that we do this before the election, because the election had no bearing of the issues. The perception of it, yes, I agree. But I did actually numerous times not try to wait for the election. This is a matter that needed to be addressed. And there's never a good time to have a hard discussion about any emergency service. So is there anybody else that would like to?
Well, I don't know if I can respond because I wasn't here during most of this, but I was here, but I wasn't on this board. The trust of the city is what you brought up. And,
it's more of the financial aspect of what's going on right now. We keep going back to court, which we're funding lawyers from the taxpayers of an issue with the city that's been going on. I moved here in 2013, and the earliest news article I could find was 2012, was a year before that. So we're 9 years deep into the issue with the water, right? So I don't know when to start it, but now we're going to continue. We're going to enter into a new agreement. We're going to let them have our assets that we bought through the millage, the ability to renegotiate in 3 years, and still have this pending. It seems super high risk to the taxpayers and the people you represent.
we're not giving the assets, but they're going to use them, yes, for services. The contract, if you've read it, it does indicate that they would come back to us if and when we choose to move into some other program.
Hey, Russ, can you move your mic a little closer?
Sure. Doesn't help me hear you
It helps
guys.
the people out.
All right. So that's addressed in the contract. The city litigation is being addressed through an effort, part of which has been made public.
Down at the bottom.
And that has to do with trying to set up a water and sewer authority. So whether we're close, we're not litigating actively right now. Let's put it that way. That's being worked on. And there's a group from the township and a group from the city that's trying to work all those details out. That's the public part of that whole thing. So I would tell you that from my point of view, I think there's progress being made there. But we now have a department without very many personnel, not enough personnel, safely staffed for our desire to provide these services to our township residents.
But that's from a semi-self-inflicted wound from the way that this was rolled out.
Well, I came on the board shortly after that, but that you can talk about that in terms of a couple different reasons why that might have happened. I'm not going to get specific about that now, but there's more than one reason in terms of the bad timing of any discussion about a merger at that point, which this is not. This is a contract for services, entirely significantly different, at least in form and intent. But yeah, you make good points, but it doesn't really, to me, get to the bottom line of what is the best decision to provide the best service for the people of this township. We have a little over 9,000 people in this township. The city has just under 10,000, I believe. We're not that far apart population, but we are somewhat less. But we believe, I believe, let me put it that way. I don't think we believe, because we act as a board and not everyone agrees. But I believe that right now, because we've asked for other options and no readily available option has come forward, that this is a good alternative, a good effort, not a good alternative, good option for us to look at seriously because of the services it can provide compared to there's a lot of emotional appeal to having your own township fire department. But if there's a service available that can provide you the same thing for half or a third of the cost, why would you not look at it? And I'm thinking we're actually getting more than the same thing. So, and the city chief has made that presentation multiple times about what we would be getting from this contract. But not everyone wants to hear that.
I make a
Yes,
point,
by all
if I
means.
may. The millage. Let's talk about that for just a few minutes, okay? I'm on that I was on the ad hoc committee, and we talked at great length about the cost of doing business. And although I was not on the original board that talked about this, I believe Cash was, and the percentage of 1.5% kept surfacing. And I'm sort of speaking from historical value, not from being there. But through the process of the ad hoc committee, of looking at the books, looking at the revenue streams, et cetera, it became very clear that 1.5% is simply inadequate. And so what is a reasonable number would be at least double that. And if this agreement were not to go through, it is very likely that this body would have no choice but to come back to the constituents and say we need more. And if it were if it were up to me today, it would be probably in the neighborhood of 3.5%. So about maybe a little more than doubling than what we have right now, so that we could create not only a very viable fire department, but we could anticipate future needs for the fire department. And so the ad hoc committee is keenly aware of that. If they're not, then they just simply weren't listening. But it is important to understand that money would be the driving engine, and that the taxpayer would have to support that. Because for every dollar we take away from the general fund in an effort to fund fire department is a dollar that we take away from road repairs or other important functions that the township has. So just as a point of clarification. And there was also some conversation early on about streams of money that came in from other than millage monies. And that would just simply prove not to be the case. And so just so you know, that we are keenly aware that the current millage number is inadequate.
But didn't you use money from the general fund before to support the fire department?
I still do. And
But you're trying not to now, right? I mean, that's.
well,
kind of what's been
ideally, it
said
would
in
be
numerous-
nice. I think in the past that, and perhaps Michelle or somebody else could address this better, but the past had a completely different accounting system. The present has what's called a BSA accounting system, which allocates monies out to all departments so that each department has a budget. And so, Michelle and I.
I think it was in 2018 that they started a separate fund for public safety. Before that, all public safety money was in the general fund. So it was all commingled together.
Okay.
Keep in mind also that the millage for the general fund is what, a half a point less than the millage fund. So we would
Fire department.
quite literally, fire department, excuse me, we would quite literally have all of the township revenue go towards fire services, and no other services could be operated that didn't fall within a separate fund.
All the other departments would be covered by the revenue sharing from the state.
Right.
And from a
Which is being
historical
reduced.
prep, you were I believe the only trustee through that process of the fire committee going towards the operational millage. Would you like to add anything to that process, the conversation?
No, I mean, obviously, like Steve said, that, we have found out that we are severely insufficiently funded. But I don't think it's just the fire department, and it's also the township. What do we get, 1 mil? 1.0?
1.0136.
It is not enough to operate a modern township. It isn't. And we could have to do something different all the way around.
How does that just become a surprise though? Beginning of November though?
I don't think it was a surprise. I've been on the board about 2.5 years, and we've been discussing it at board meetings, at budget sessions, since the first day I was here. So it's not new.
When we worked on our budget too, I mean, we had many road projects brought before our board. And we only funded the ones that had to be done, the most desperate, the dust control. We just couldn't do it.
And I think with the, when we brought the SNA, when we got that system up and running, there was definitely a clear picture of where the money was going, because you could actually see that on a day-to-day basis. Track it. And that's when we really started to notice, this much money is going here, this is going here. It was very clear. The accounting prior to that was not as easy to see.
Well, you were on paper ledgers when it started.
Handwritten ledgers.
Are there any other comments or from city personnel? That was you.
Could I ask a question?
Actually-
Would you please clarify that I'm in on all the funding, the water department?
It's an
does not
enterprise
get
fund.
Money from the taxpayer.
That's the only fund that does not. That is an
Right,
enterprise
but
fund.
He just stated that he lives out
So,
on Maple
well,
Road, and
Yes,
that taxpayers pay the attorneys, they don't.
they don't.
The water
And
fund.
So-
people need to
But
understand.
we appreciate that. But
Well,
yes, that
I
is a point of
appreciate it.
clarification, that is an enterprise fund. And that gets to the point of equal but different. I also agree with some of your statements, sir. But we're here to discuss what a fire department, and that it has to be a consideration nonetheless, that we have been actually, and I believe, and we have a representation from city council, we probably have the best working relationship between both municipalities now than we've ever had. And I'm proud that we've worked as hard as we've had to get to this point. Doesn't mean that it's an easy shot from here. But how long do you continue to divide a community as small as Alpena? It's,
I mean, I guess how long do you guys drag this out for? I mean, you guys are really the responsible ones to,
yeah, we've
to
taken,
conclude-
we've
to
taken that
conclude this,
torch as
so-
the board. It didn't start with
So
this one.
that's-
We hope to finish it.
you know, but to me, it just seems risky to enter into a separate agreement with that still open. So I would suggest or advise that you laser focus on getting that resolution before you put this other deal in place.
Well, actually, Deputy Chief.
So I'll address a couple of things really quick, sir. The first thing as far as the assets still remain the township's assets. One of the things by contract, it does address in there as well. We're gonna do a complete inventory. Everything's gonna get tagged as to what's the township, what's the cities. Our city stuff already is inventoried and marked, clearly identified, cataloged, and that sort. We're gonna do the exact same thing with all of the township equipment. Anything that's township owned will be cataloged. Every year, we have to provide that annual inventory of that, an audit of what is still in service and what's out of service. Anything we take out of service, I believe there's an ad hoc board that is gonna be responsible to review that stuff and see if it should be truly taken out of service and replaced or just taken out of service. So as far as the assets still remain the townships. We're just using it to provide that protection for the township residents. So we're not doing anything different with that. So just so everybody's clear on that. The next thing, as far as trust, when you talk about trust, as far as the fire department, and I can't talk about the other public parts of the city or the township, but the fire department's been in existence for 150 years. And we've been providing EMS service for 40 years. And of that, about 25, 26 years at ALS. We've progressed through the years to adapt for the times. We're not going anywhere. Our job is to provide that service to you guys. That is essentially what we're looking at doing. So as far as trust from the fire department, I think we're a very reputable and trustworthy organization. So
I mean, I agree with that. There was never a question of the service from the fire department, your guys' commitment to the community. It's more about the financial situation between the two leadership groups of the township and the city that is more of my concern.
Sure.
than-
From our standpoint, from at least the city fire department, our thing is trying to do the right thing to help out. That is essentially what it is. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Okay.
The other thing, as far as response times, I know there's been a question about the response times. Our average response time anywhere in the county, the whole county, for all 5,200 calls that we do a year is 10 minutes or less, any place in the county. That's all the way out to Doctors Club Road. That's all of our responses together. Our average out the door time is less than 2 minutes on any given time. And that's all stuff that we have data. It's all stuff that we track. It's tracked through dispatch. So that is real hard data that we actually have. So I just want that to be clear that there is no delay in care. And actually, this is going to help because you're going to have an ALS ambulance out the door or a truck with 2 guys able to go to work immediately, with more coming from the city. So you have more resources right away than what you've ever had. So that's all I have for that.
Like to add, if I might.
By all
Just to
means.
make very clear, when this whole thing started, there was one full-time firefighter EMT and a cadre of paid-on-call personnel coming from home at each station. One guy north, one guy south. A lot of the time, because of their ambulance licensure, they had to send both guys to one call to meet the minimum staffing of 2 EMTs, leaving the other half of the township uncovered. As it sits today in the north side, there are 2 paramedics and an ALS ambulance, not a basic one, an advanced one, not one person, but 2 people going out of the exact same station. So presumably the response time is exactly the same as it always has been. And as we build up a paid-on-call component, replace those who are in place but not responding for whatever reason, that will improve with folks coming from home as well. But the EMS response from here is double the level and twice as many people as it has ever been. And under this contract, it will be that way on both sides of the contract of the township if this happens. So that's, I just want to make that very clear. In a nutshell, it's twice the service, both level or quality and number of people for less than half the money. And the reason that that's possible is through economies of scale. We already have the ambulances and the people and the training and all of the things that are necessary to run a department. It's simply a matter of stretching out the boundary a little bit.
John Cape, Mr. Capeless, you'll have your opportunity, but I don't, if I allow just random questions, I'd like this to kind of keep orderly, but after this, if you would like to.
Podium, I'll ask anything, answer anything you'd like, John, no problem. So I just want to clarify that, sir, that.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate that. And, again, it just goes to the fact of with the pending open litigation still, that is my concern with another agreement with the other party at this point.
Did I just respond quickly to that? And then, no, let you see. As I watched the board prior to 2016 and then after, there was a great deal of tension with other units of government. I worked for the county. I came to the township and now I eventually ended up here for whatever that's worth. I have the perspective, the advantage or disadvantages it may be of a perspective of not having been born and raised here, not graduated from high school here, but that carries a lot here, right? And sometimes I think it rolls over into personalities, jealousies, tensions, whatever. But one of the things that I saw as I was attending these board meetings was that was fomented here among other places. And my belief has always been that units of government should work together, cooperate together, and figure things out together, and be, if you will, friendly to each other, not in angst with each other. So I came on this board with that intention as part of the goal here. But I also had studied the budget enough, didn't know as much as I do now, and I don't know enough now. But I studied the budget enough to know that this fire department was a vacuum sucking in a lot of money, more than the budget should have had to stand. But that's not what happened to bring us to this point. What happened is we have to start over trying to rebuild a department from scratch. And that's a 2 to 5 year process, I believe. Not just in getting people on board, but getting them trained and proficient enough to do the service that needs to be done.
Trustee Polly. Oh, I apologize, Mayor. Trustee Polly, real quick.
I guess one thing we have to remember, and we kind of forget, we're dealing with governments, and governments aren't slow. They're like extra slow. So when Supervisor Skibby said that we wanted to bring this before the election, that was truly in place. But every time you turn around, you got to match it up with the dates of the meetings. You got to get the attorneys to have their blessings on it, and they're not speedy at all either. They work on the clock. So when you put all this together, everything takes a doggone long. We had a little family business. My brother and I get together, we make a decision, we do it. Doesn't work that way. So you got to take the time, you got to have the patience to work through it. And sometimes you would think, no, this isn't right, but it's the way it is. It's the law, so we have to comply with it.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you got somebody else. Go ahead.
Mayor Walagor.
Because it was, I mean, obviously, when you bring up the litigation and the issues that the township have faced, and there was some nodding heads. So I would assume that there's others that agree with you. I think, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one left in an elected position that was there when this started back in maybe 2012, when the litigation started. I'll just speak to it really briefly, that was handed to us. It was handed to all of us, and it needed to be addressed and fixed. So the city started that. progress on that from our perspective. And it's been, I'll have to agree with Nathan that right now, the communication and working relationship that the two governments have has never been better than it is right now today. And I guess, and we're working on that, but I guess my rebuttal to you, or my opinion on what you said, would be that this, working with this, the fire department issue with the township was probably a good thing, in that it improved our working relationship that we are bringing back to the table when we work on water and sewer. So it's really, I guess from your perspective, I see your point. But the two issues are so completely different. And that one's a lot more complex, but we are working together. And I think being able to work with the board on this fire department project was probably enhanced our relationship as far as getting water and sewer done. So.
Trustee Reinhardt, did you have last comment?
Well, I agree with Norm that coming to these meetings, which I recommend all of you, by the way, is like watching sausage being made, or making it. And that's been described. I think it was Everett Dirksen that said that way back when in the U.S. Senate, that it's like watching sausage made until we see government work. But it's painful, it's difficult, and like John over there, you just sometimes just want to say something out of order just because it's boiling up, and you can't do it. But just understand it. We invite people to come to these meetings and learn about what we're trying to learn and deal with. And it's not fun. It can be the most grueling couple hours you can spend in a month, or a couple times a month. But we recommend it. And I will tell you that very seldom are these offices contested, and they should be. People should be running for offices in these positions. And when they don't agree with me or somebody else, they should be coming in and saying, I'll put my name in. What's that?
Yeah, so I'm not trying to attack, but at the same time, you're the board that's elected to represent me. I know how difficult it is when you serve on boards and you're volunteering time and putting excess time. And so I do appreciate it. But at the same time, this thing kind of has a perception in the community that you're wanting to outsource a lot of the key things for the constituents. So this isn't an attack on you guys, but it's kind of the perception of what's been going on since November. And I love the community, and it's different because I grew up in the Flint area. I spent a lot of time in Detroit, and I lived internationally too in Mexico. And it's one of the areas where you can interact in your community at a greater level than you can in a lot of those areas, that it's kind of just business. So this is a little bit different animal up in an area where it's a little more intimate and a smaller, tight-knit community. And it's not that I don't want to pit the city and the township against each other, but I mean, I'd like to see one solved before we join another one together. But I'm glad to hear you guys are working together, but it's just a concern as a taxpayer. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. Thank you. The podium is open. John, would you like that?
First of all, I apologize for speaking out of turn. Secondly, I thank you all for your service. This is a very difficult situation, and you're right, it is somewhat emotional at times. I sent prepared remarks to all of you, so I hope you had a chance to read them. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to please do so. I do have 3 questions, and the question I'll start with first, Chief Forbush, how many people will you send to a medical from the Northside Station?
2. However, once we have reinstituted a paid-on-call system, it will be greater than 2. And even as it is today, high acuity calls, CPR calls, things like that, get a higher level of response, typically an echo or a second ambulance from the city in addition to the Northside unit. So depending upon the call, it could be higher than that, but the bare minimum is 2.
And prior to November, when this disruption occurred that forced people to decide whether or not they wanted to keep working for the township, we had to have mandated a response of two people of our appropriate licensure from this station. Sometimes that was dumping our south side station. Sometimes it was a paid on call responder in the area, but that's 4 people. So at least 1 first responder, 1 EMT from our station, plus your 2 paramedics.
Right.
So it's hard to say that we have double the response when you're going to have half the response in the future.
What you had
Potentially.
Prior to November was typically 1 full-time employee from the north station and 1 full-time employee from the south station. Sometimes there was a paid on call, and sometimes there wasn't. But the guaranteed response that I keep hearing from the crew, the folks here, is you had 1 person on duty. Now you have 2 people on duty.
Right, but we had 2 people on duty plus 2 paramedics coming from the city because we also pay taxes to the county EMS budget. So we had 4 people responding guaranteed every time, and now we will have 2.
At an incident is not necessarily a helpful or not helpful thing. It depends on
Right,
the
but
situation.
that's fair, but I just want to make sure that people heard that the math is 2 now, not 4. So my second question is for Rob Edmonds.
As opposed to 1, yeah.
Tell you what, I'm going to ask my 2 more questions and then I'll sit down so that we don't, and you guys can just respond. My second question is about Doctors Club Road. From here to Doctors Club Road, according to my Google Maps, is 35 minutes. So I'm very curious how you have a 10-minute response to Doctors Club Road.
Average on 5,200 calls, our average any place in the county, that's 5,200 calls, average is less than 10 minutes.
Right, but then you followed it up with even to Doctors Club Road. So let's just make sure that that part is clear as well. Yeah, I'm going to ask my next question, then I'm going to let you guys answer your questions. So sure.
That includes Doctors Club Road.
The average.
So if there
Yeah.
was a 25-minute response time to Doctors Club Road in the snowstorm, that means there are that many more calls that were 2 minutes or 1 minute or 3 minutes or whatever to get to that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I still think, and again, I'm just trying to ask questions, but since we're having a back and forth, there's the valuable thing for me with the township is that we have paid on call response. And we have had better paid on call response at times and worse. People come and go, staffing levels change. Right now, we are about as bad as it could be. And I would say that's because the fire department is a family and some people have set up a pathway where we're tearing this fire department apart and we're tearing the family apart. If you don't end this soon, your only option will be the city because fire departments are like a family and you're tearing this family apart. And I want you to try to look at the true costs because it may be more than what appears on your balance sheet. Not all of the paid on call firefighters are going to want to continue with the city. And they're the ones who live closer to Doctors Club Road potentially than the ambulance is coming. So if I'm out at my lake house and Matt Klemchek is down the road and gets there first, I get help sooner than if I have to wait for the response from the station. So the paid on call is a vital part of this. It's a vital part of this department, and it's been under attack for years. I mean, we haven't been at, I say we've been at war with the front office for years. So, but back to my last question. Again, very conscious of the 3 minutes. Is it possible for us to solve the water issue? Enter into a temporary contract with the city. And if you resolve the township water issue, then we do this? Why does it have to happen now? Why does it have to happen first? Thank you very much.
Would you like to start, Deputy Chief?
Mr. Katos, one thing I want to address really quick. So the first responder involvement right now with the township, as you said, is extremely low, like non-existent. So in our side, we have 0. There is 0 responders. I'm currently on medical leave. And I'm not pointing fingers at you. I'm saying currently to the north side, we originally had 11 or 12 people that said that it was committed to respond to the north side area, and we essentially have 0. That includes fires and EMS response. We had a fire earlier this week on Bagley Street, and we got none of your first responders from the township came. It was all city guys, and I think we showed up with 9 personnel at 7 o'clock in the morning. So that's our response. Okay. Even on the south side, and I've been on a couple different calls to the south side, there has been nobody other than your paid personnel that have showed up. So yes, your paid on call system right now is very broken. And if this contract goes through and we are contracted to help provide that service, one of the things we are going to try and help rebuild is that paid on call system. Are we going to be successful? That's up to the people that want to be involved or not. But I can tell you from the standpoint of me as your training officer for the city and would be the township at that point, Even the training sessions that we've had very little turnout on that. So it's a choice by individuals whether or not they want to participate. If they want to participate, we're willing to have them. We want that system built back up. And yes, I do agree with you. It's a family. I've been doing this for 32 years. I totally agree with you and I know where you're coming from.
So, and my response to you is, thank you for serving the township residents. I said that in the newspaper on Saturday. I'm grateful for you stepping up. We need your help, okay? And I enjoy working with everyone on your crew. There's not a city firefighter that I don't enjoy working with. And I've known you a long, long time, and I've enjoyed every fire I've been on with you, okay? Not that we enjoy fires, but I enjoy working with you, right? So I 100% agree with that. And I'm thankful that this is an opportunity on the table. But I would argue that you should ask yourself why the township is in this problem, in this situation. I think you should ask yourselves, why is the township fire department in the situation that it's in right now? Why are personnel not responding? Why are personnel not interested in continuing on? What has happened to make this fire department that was vibrant less so? I see Matt Benedict right there. He was recruited because we put together a cadet program and we started recruiting high school students. He was a high school cadet. And then we brought him in and we trained him, and now he's a full-time employee for the township. And we were on a good path. And I mean, this situation has messed it up. Okay. So now it looks like we don't have a good fire department. And we pair that with the lack of response, and we pair that with the financial difficulties, and it seems like an easy solution to fix. But in my prepared remarks, I have concerns about whether or not both the city and the township will ultimately have better services. Will we have fewer firefighters to respond on these emergencies? I saw in the paper that we will have a retired reserve and an auxiliary, but I also saw that Chief Borbush said that the retired reserve won't necessarily respond and enter into structure fires, which means they can't perform vital tasks on scene. I also saw that the auxiliary won't necessarily be trained. And then I was concerned because there was a lack of discussion. Maybe it was missed, but there was a lack of discussion of paid on call. So Chief Forbush knows that we have to have a critical number of people to handle certain incidents. And without enough people to handle those incidents, it puts everyone at risk. I think that was acknowledged a few minutes ago. So he's already preparing a retired reserve and an auxiliary. We had a good fire department. And right now I would say that we have fewer people in the township to respond to emergencies, but also in the city, because we work together and we have mutual aid agreements. And when they have a fire, they often call us, and vice versa. And overall, we are going to have fewer personnel to handle these problems. That's where the savings comes from. And I heard you say it was a third as much, but from my math, it's like, it's a third of the savings, about 300,000. Maybe it's more, but if it's 300,000, that's your 3 full-time firefighters. But I don't know if you guys are factoring the loss of the paid on call. I think that's an important consideration. I yield back my time. Sorry to take so long.
Michelle.
You made the comment that the paid on calls have been in conflict for years.
Yes.
And I guess I would
With
like
the
a little.
front office, that's what
I would like a little clarification on what you mean by that, because I've always tried to work with the entire fire department. And then I've always wanted to support them. So I don't understand where.
Right. So
where you're
it
getting.
predates your arrival.
Okay.
This has been happening since before you were here.
Okay.
Marie and the fire department had a good working relationship at times. It was tumultuous at times. But I can say that I've been on this fire department. I got on this fire department in 2001. I left for a brief time because I didn't think operations were safe in the 2002, 2003 time period.
Mhm.
And when we started doing, and I could have my dates wrong, but when we started doing medical response and training started changing, I got back on this fire department and I rejoined. I have no skin in this game. I had a hernia repair surgery done not long ago. That hernia was incurred in an ice rescue training. I noticed it outside of the window and I never reported it, but my body is tired. And frankly, my morale is as low as it's been working with this township. And I can say for at least the last 10 years, we felt like they didn't trust us when we gave reports on medical transfers and cost information. Nobody really did anything to change it until this big change came along. And so I feel like we've been at war trying to justify our existence and the need for township services to be provided by this fire department for at least a decade.
And I would like to comment as well. I mean, Michelle and I are the two that met with Chief Robbins, and we recommended that he, you know, submit something to the board for a raise for the paid on call. I mean, so I don't get the whole,
I don't turn in my timesheets. I'm not in this for the money.
I know, I'm just saying though, but I don't know where the conflict thing with the front office.
But
I'm
if
not
it started.
sure.
10
I'm not
years ago,
referring,
it was pre-
I mean,
pre-us.
we've certainly been at war since November, right? That's obvious. And the planning for this happened before that. I mean, I didn't step up to the podium to go through all this.
Yeah.
But by your own admission, you started working on this agreement in 2017. And according to the information I have, we, the fire department, were not involved in that discussion until 2 days after an election. So it seems like I was left out. You said you've asked, and I said this in my letter to you today, you said you asked for input from the fire department. Did you hold a Q&A session with firefighters? Did you
I asked for
solicit
input
email?
Just from the chief.
Okay,
We
well,
deal with the chief.
I mean, the chief is one member of the department. We have a lot of information that we could provide you and help you make these decisions if you would include us in the
Well,
process, but we were
I've
left
had
out.
people give me input. and-
Good.
And I've asked questions specifically.
Right.
Of certain people, and they couldn't give me anything but conclusions. They couldn't give me facts and data and evidence.
Did you
that would
find
help me make decisions.
my information helpful? Do you need more data? I mean, we can provide.
I
you with
understand
data.
what you're saying.
Right,
Well, I understand what you're saying, but
but you disagree with it.
to the extent that where we're at right now, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're in a practical spot that has to be addressed.
Mhm.
And you can attribute it to whatever happened in November. You can attribute it to what happened over 10 years. I don't know. I mean, if there was that much dissatisfaction over 10 years, to me, the issue has been a leadership issue that's bigger than just what happened in November.
Yeah, and John, I know that you are passionate and we could probably just have you at the podium for the rest of the evening potentially. But to give everybody the opportunity, are there any other responses to Mr. Capeless's comments? Did you have
One second, John.
I just wanted to, again, thank you. We do appreciate. I think this is a conclude. I think what I've heard so far indicates that you will be taking care of me as a township resident in the future, and we do appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Just really quick, couple of things. So as far as training and stuff, our retiree reserve that we're actually utilizing is actually going to be personnel that have retired from the station, that still want to be included and help where they can. A lot of these guys are very experienced truck drivers, and they can help educate and train people if we have a fire situation. I don't have the time to get on the truck because there's things to do as a command officer, and these guys will come in and do basically auxiliary roles and mentor some of the younger people. The intent is not to put them back in structure guard. They're 55 years old and older, but there is other roles that they can take to help with
Free up other people that can't.
Correct. With that, with the auxiliaries are going to get the same training that we get. Last year alone, like I said, we logged in almost 5,000 hours of personnel hours of training. We do a boatload of training. Over the last 3 days, they put in about 15 hours of training in 3 days, all 3 shifts. Training is a big thing for us. We do have 5 EMS IC instructor coordinators, and we have 6 fire training instructors. We do training all the time. For us, for me, my passion is in the training capacity that now. And I believe it's important to take those people who actually want to be engaged in an auxiliary program, not just there for the t-shirt. People that are there to actually serve the community, get the training, become better and serve the community. Those are the people that we want, honestly. And that's what we're looking for with the auxiliary program, is to build it bigger and better, not only for the city, but for the township. It's a collective agreement, basically. It's the big picture. So I hope that helps.
May I ask a question, Rob?
Yes.
So Rob or Chief, Forbush, are these either of these 2 programs that you're planning on implementing, would they replace paid on call?
They are paid on call. Both of these programs are paid on call type of program. There are 2 divisions, reserve and auxiliary. The auxiliary will become the city's paid on call component with or without the township contract. We end up contracting with the township, it will become the paid on call component to serve that contract as well. However, if not, we're going to make our own because everyone needs more personnel.
And the retired folks, you're talking about driving a truck, but I assume also operating some of the equipment and also
Yeah.
fighting, will they be fighting fires from outside of structures?
When you say truck driver, he means pump operations, portable equipment. those
Sure.
kinds of things.
Somebody that's trained to know which dials to turn and which
Absolutely. If you
buttons
have
to push.
someone with, 30 years experience in operating those pumps, and then you've got a new employee with 2 years experience in operating a pump, who would you rather have inside the house? And who would you rather have on the pump end?
Right.
So it's a force multiplier.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Mr. Andrew, I also point out, our retiree reserve, we have a gentleman that just retired. He's not officially off the books yet, but it's coming up. He has 30+ years experience in the fire service. So for him to get on scene, maybe we need a safety officer. He's somebody that's seen a lot of fires, he's seen a lot of incidents. He can read that building better than somebody who is maybe 5 or 10 years on the job. So that's what we're looking at, using them as their expertise, because once somebody leaves a job, especially the fire service, the only way you get that is through experience. And now we can have him paired up with somebody else to teach them that role, that support role for our fire suppression activities. So they're gonna be outside activities still active. We're just not gonna have them be the hard chargers going in with the hose line, pulling ceilings and that type of stuff. They're gonna be in a support role to help pass on that knowledge and build not only our officers, but our other personnel as well.
By all means.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I hate to keep joining in. On the training issue, I just want to point out for many, many years, for 150 years, 149 years of the Alpena Fire Department, we never had a full-time training officer. Training officer who did, his primary function was training. Not in addition to being a captain, not in addition to running a shift, not in addition to running an ambulance. Training, that's what he does. And the difference was that when we used on-shift guys to be the training officer, they did the best that they could with the time that they had to put into it, but there wasn't enough time. That was the same model that Alpena Township had in the past. And that's the difference between a little bit of training and a lot of training. 5,000 personnel hours last year is because we had a dedicated expert instructor whose primary focus is doing that. By the same token, we have a full-time guy whose primary focus is doing fire prevention and risk reduction. He doesn't do it as a sideline. He doesn't do it on top of other things. That's his job. And on top of those two, we still have a full-time chief who's supposed to run the operation and keep things going. And then the shifts, then the 9 people per shift per day, minimum 8, that routinely run the emergency calls and so forth. The big difference is being able to have that administrative staff, full-time administrative staff and support staff to make those things happen. And that's the easiest, one of the easiest ways to show the difference between trying to reconstitute a parallel department in the township and using economies of scale. Through the contract, you'll get a full-time training officer and a full-time CRR officer. We just erase the borders, move out a little bit. And the result is a safer community. Thank you.
The podium is open.
My name is Kevin Ginter. Some of this stuff has been, I will repeat myself, especially to the mayor and some of the township board members. So I think, let me start at the beginning. That's always the best, right? So on a small recap, I've talked to people around the community, talked to friends that have been in the fire service, people I've worked with before. They're all really confused, as well as I, on why there's no dedication to its own fire department, why there's no fostering, no incentive, no encouragement. At one point, I think it all became fictitiously about money. There's money involved, that's for sure. In my opinion, the reason Chief Forbush, Deputy Chief Edmonds, and Mayor Walagora, I mean, they have a large financial stake. You guys are going to give them 400 and some thousand over so many years. to subsidize along with the rest of the county residents, which are going to pay after the new millage increase. They're going to pay almost $1.5 million. And then the city fire department is going to receive 1.3 million in revenues. That's almost $3 million. You divide that by $100,000 per personnel for wages and benefits. And the city has its own, I mean, I don't have a problem per se, but why is nobody else reaping the benefits of having their staff paid for by the rest of the county? I would argue that everyone in Alpena County is subsidizing the fire department via the ambulance fund. Am I missing something? Maybe a little bit, but what if we all enjoyed some type of uptick or subsidy or revenue stream that the city is able to take advantage of? Understand they have to staff for the 3 rigs in the contract.
30 seconds.
There's 30 seconds.
Yeah, I got 30 seconds remaining. I've always given you the heads up because that's what you preferred, Mr. Ginter.
Mr. Capeless had 3 minutes.
Mr. Ginter,
The doctor had 33 minutes.
we were answering questions. Your initial statements are 3 minutes. That is the rule. We will, if there's adequate time, we will come back. That's what I stated out the front, Mr.
Oh,
Ginter.
okay.
I have a time. I do too.
Oh, you're gonna be my timer?
It was less than, I had less than you had, but anyway.
To Mr. Ginter's, I guess, questions. Would anybody like to?
Well, I didn't hear any
I say, was there a
questions.
question
Yeah.
there?
I mean, that's, I think the difference.
Don't think I'll
Take the other 3 minutes right now. If you want to give me the other 3 minutes.
No, we'll go with anybody else that wants to talk first. That was the rules. That's at least what I understood.
Yeah, oh, yeah. It's
Okay.
the rules. I mean, so to Mr. Ginter's comments or statements, would anybody like to address that? Just-
Well, I will say this,
Okay.
and this is not. Our chief stood up at that meeting in November that I attended as a non-board member. And he said, I'm going to go to bat for my guys. And the guys all left except for one. And
Could you
so.
speak up, please?
Okay, so our chief fought for his people in that fire department, and he said he was going to in November. And he stood up and said, I'm here to, in essence, do battle for my guys. And he did. But within a month, 6 weeks at the most, they were all gone. They were all gone, except for one. You know, Chris Stevens is still here. But for that, and that's the fix we're in. Whatever reason the guys left, that's where we're at and what triggered this. Yes, would we look at other options to provide services more efficiently, but not under the crunch that we're under, but for that. So that's my response.
And I can actually, to part of your initial discussion, I guess, was a dedication and support. I know that there's not just myself that sat down and tried everything that we could to communicate with Mr. Robbins. I know that there's 3 other trustees that I should respond as well. We've tried to give every level of support. And if anything said otherwise, that would be a misnomer. Now, you can say it all you would like, but we did. Dave was in that room. Michelle's been in that room. Laura's been in that room. I believe a blueprint was given of how to make things better in that duration of time. Am I speaking out of turn to that fact?
No, you're not.
Is there any other comments to Mr. Ginters?
I'm good at this time, thank you.
Anybody of the board? Podium is open.
Thank you.
Every opportunity to improve communications. So this is supposed to be a question and answer, and I realize that I'll be limited to 3 minutes. And being as I'm one of the regular folks, instead of having a seat at the front table. So question one, how much over budget was the fire department last year? Okay, how much budget are we over this year?
You're not over budget this year.
Were we over budget last year?
Out of the general, well, are we talking?
My
Yeah.
question is
Yeah.
there was a budget,
Yes.
there was a budget presented, it was accepted, the board approved it. And I know that within the year, there were some line items that we went over and there were some line items that we were way under. So we did line items. So we were in the budget. And we're in the budget this year. And that's approved till next April. Okay. My next question is how much money did the township lose last year in revenue sharing? Whether it had to do with COVID or staffing or whatever.
How much revenue sharing?
Yeah, how much
Money.
did the township lose in revenue sharing?
COVID didn't have an impact to constitutional or revenue sharing.
Okay,
There
so
was actually a moment where our revenue sharing was anticipated from state levels down to incur and prepare for a 30, at minimum, a 30% reduction in revenue sharing.
we didn't actually experience that though, right?
We did have a decrease
It
in,
did have a decrease on a couple of them, but I'm not sure of the exact amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
But nothing worth flushing the fire department for, so. Okay, there was an ad hoc committee that was formed by the board that we spent many hours, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the recommendation that came back from the ad hoc committee was to stick with the township fire department and try to fix those financial woes. So then my question is, why did the board not take the ad hoc committee's suggestion?
I can answer that. I think when the ad hoc committee was formed, each member of this board had a different vision of what the ad hoc committee was going to do. I did not think that the ad hoc committee was going to give us a recommendation or do a budget. I thought they were going to present options to us. That was my interpretation. And I think other people interpreted it differently of the purpose of the ad hoc.
So in that theme of things, when we're talking about reimagining the department prior to the November debacle, we're talking about, there was a lot of focus at that time on whether the non-emergency transfer service was either making money or costing the township money. So we understand that, but what everybody should know now is that the outcome of that is that the township did in fact terminate the non-emergent transport service, which left us with basically now just fire and medical first response. Okay, which basically reduce our call volume by more than 50%. Me personally, I think that would have some type of impact on not only this year's budget, but a projected budget. So
30 seconds, Mr. Rowe.
Okay, I've heard some members say that there's many benefits to bringing city fire on scene. I was just wondering to name at least 3 of those benefits other than having paramedics on scene quicker. I've been a paramedic since the dinosaurs, and I'm here to tell you paramedics save lives, EMTs save paramedics. I'm telling you, a paramedic's not going to kick down the door with a monitor and drug box and go to work on somebody without doing a BLS procedure first and assessing that patient. And that is the whole idea behind the tiered system, which we're about to flush. And being as that I have many other questions, but the one thing I really want to get to is there's been a couple of comments made about participation from the paid on calls and lack thereof and where they are. So my question is, of the last 5 fires that occurred in the northern township portion, how many of those times was the South Station requested for services?
By all means, chief.
When we started the temporary contract at the north side, we established an SOP, which you and I personally discussed. And said that since there was so little response capability at the south, at the time there were only 2 of you, now there's 4. And a paid on call contingent, that we would not request south side assistance, because if we did, we would then strip all of the township of its response capability. All of our north side resources and our city resources are tied up at the north side, and we ask the south side to come also. We've essentially made the whole township not response capable. That doesn't make sense. So we knew, and we agreed ahead of time that we were not going to call you for assistance. We were going to call other people for assistance so that you could concentrate on rebuilding response capability to the south side. And that's exactly what we did. We called Maple Ridge or Presque Isle or whoever we needed to call to get the assistance that we needed. And then we fielded an awful lot of our people. At the Greenway fire, for example, we had 20 AFD personnel on scene, which is 1 9-man shift and another shift called back off duty, plus command staff and so forth, and another 20 for mutual aid companies. We only had 1 or maybe 2 township people on that scene at any point, and 1 was self-dispatched. We never requested assistance from the south. But the reason for that, by agreement up front, was that if we called the south to help the north, and the city was already tapped, that would reduce the protection of the entire community, and we didn't want to do that, so we used the neighbors instead.
I appreciate your concern. So better to strip Maple Ridge, Presque Isle, and CRTC than to have actual Alpena Township apparatus show up on an Alpena Township fire. My point being is that people are wondering why, township paid on calls are not responding to calls, and they're not being paged out or requested.
That's not true.
That is
Not on
true,
every
sir.
call.
That is
All the
true.
Medical calls, they're paged on every call.
And that leads to a good question too. Are we talking about a fire department here or EMS services? Because I stood at this podium several months ago and said I felt very uncomfortable selling this fire department out based on antiquated EMS data. And every time I hear fire department, but all I get is EMS data. Okay, yeah, we understand the paramedics are going to be 5 minutes closer to the 10-minute whatever, because they're going to be in these stations now. I'm not talking about, not all fire departments run EMS. Not all fire departments run ALS, not all fire departments run BLS. So I'm just wondering what there seems to be this feel in the air to me. And again, I apologize. Yes, I am being emotional, because I rather take exception when I hear people say that my guys are less than professional or somebody can do better.
Nobody said that.
Oh, really? Because I just heard that several minutes
Mr.
ago.
Robbins, this is
Okay.
Mr. Robbins.
Mr. Skibby.
This is, and I laid out the ground rules. And if you don't respect this board or our guests or the constituents that are in this room, then please remove yourself. We will give you more time, but personality conflict is an unprofessional manner. If you have questions, well, it sounds like we did have a fire engine that was self-dispatched out of Southside. Does that make everybody feel better?
Because he
out here,
and I'm sorry.
Yeah. The podium is open.
My name is Karen Vance. I live at 110 Beglan Drive on the north side out by the county park. I had no intentions of speaking tonight. I have absolutely nothing prepared. But I have been dying for months now to get an answer to one question. And I'm very curious. I come from this to this from the perspective of a taxpayer and a voter. I am curious to know, it's like we had an election Tuesday, Wednesday, the announcement of the 48-hour coup before you're going to vote on Friday. I want to know from each one of you, if you, with the exception of Mr. Reiner, because he was not here. He wasn't a part of this. I don't think he could have voted on Friday because you were just elected, what, 2 days earlier, maybe. I want to know how each one of you, if you will divulge it, were prepared to vote on what this proposal was within this 48-hour window. The firefighters never were notified. I don't know how you do that to your fellow neighbors and firefighters who have given anything. We're supposed to be friends and neighbors, and this is what you do to your fellow firefighters? Not to mention the taxpayers. You didn't let any of us know any of this. It was a 2-day window, it was like a 48-hour coup. That's how everyone in the township that I've talked to feels about this. And I'm curious to know from every one of you, if you would be willing to say how you would have voted on that announcement from Wednesday to Friday, because it would have happened if it wasn't for Bobby Sue Kujabaski. If she hadn't gotten her nose in this and tried to stop this, you'd have all voted and we'd have been none the wiser. We'd have just approved that millage. So I would appreciate it if anybody would like to share, first of all, why you thought doing that way was a good idea. I think it just stinks. It stinks to your fellow firefighters, your fellow neighbors, and the taxpayers. So please, if anybody would like to answer that, I would appreciate an answer.
Ms. Vance, I would like to. I take it you're speaking of in representation of the 48-hour coup, the joint session that we had at the Aplex in November?
No, I don't know that it was at the Aplex. It was COVID times. I just know that we read in the paper that you were going to vote within 2 days of this announcement to take over the fire department, and they knew nothing about it.
I don't know if that's, but I can answer I
Please
believe
do.
the core. So we did have a joint input session in November. And in that joint input session, I think we all learned some things and some issues that needed to be addressed. And then we went back to the drawing board.
You went
The
back to
response
the
time.
drawing board because Bobby Sue Kujabaski got involved in this.
No, by no means. We went back to the drawing board because we saw the inefficiencies in some of the response and the staffing concerns that our citizens definitely had and should have had. So there was not going to be a vote 48 hours later from the November meeting. So I don't know, and maybe Mr. Scholwitz could represent the Alpena News in terms of your statements, that's what you read in the paper.
No, from the time I got the press release. Is it his turn to speak?
Yeah, no.
Is it his turn to speak?
No.
Good point.
Good point. So that is to answer that question. That is, we were not prepared to vote because there were
Why
deficiencies.
did you not bring this before the taxpayers? Why wasn't this in the news? Why didn't everybody know? Why was everyone stunned by this? In particular, the fire department, your fellow firefighters, why were they stunned by this news? Why didn't nobody talk to them? Isn't that what you do in a decent community with your friends and neighbors?
Yes, by all means, ma'am.
But it didn't happen. And I'm curious, had you voted, what would you have voted? Was that okay to do? That's all I've got.
Would any of the other trustees like to?
At that point, there was really nothing to vote about. It was, to me, it was informational. We're about to make any sort of a conclusion at that point. We haven't seen any sort of a completed agreement, nothing at that particular point in time. Was there information sort of broken out on how it would work and so on? Sure. At that particular point in time, would I have voted? Yeah, sure, I would have voted, and I would have voted no.
Any other trustees?
I would have voted no, I can tell you that.
I'm still don't know how I'm voting. I'm still figuring it all out.
I would like to address a couple things if I might.
By all means, sir.
Unfortunately, I talk too much. I think my wife told me that. Going back to Chief Robbins and then what Karen Vance said, we did attempt to rebuild this department. After I got on this board, we
Can you
attempted.
talk louder, Russ?
I thought I was a lawyer, could talk loud. I'm sorry. I guess I'm not excited enough. We attempted to rebuild this department and we've been successful with 2 people. The minimum staffing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe was the chief and 7. And so now we have the chief and 3 people that work full-time for the department. Unfortunately, it's a realistic that it takes that long. It's a realistic that it's going to take a year and a half longer probably to get to full staffing based on that budget. And you've heard how the city staff, my belief always was and always is that that budget was too low. And that we would have to add more personnel than 7. And so I didn't know anything, Karen, back in November. But I was there to learn as well as many other people that were there. And then there were some that had skin in the game, as has been mentioned today. And a lot of the folks that have spoken have skin in the game here tonight. I know you don't, other than a citizen and taxpayer. But knowing what I know today, knowing what the options are, which are few, we can continue to try to rebuild this department, but we can't provide service with 4 people, even as we did in the past, let alone what we should be able to provide. And so we've got a millage issue to fund it the way I think it should be. And Steve Lappin mentioned the same thing a few minutes ago. And we've got a personnel problem, and these personnel are hard to find. And once you get them in place, they're harder, or it's hard to get trained properly to be able to do the job well. So just putting them on staff doesn't mean they're going to be able to go out and, as the chief talked about, fight fires or necessarily be ready to do emergency services. Because like was said before, it takes some hands-on training as well as the education. Back in the 70s, back when it was very primitive, I worked for a private ambulance company in the Detroit suburbs, and I know that most of what I learned wasn't what I learned in the classes for the training I got, which wasn't as nearly as much as even an EMT gets. It wasn't hundreds of hours, it was tens of hours at best. But I didn't learn how to do that job until I was out on the street with an experienced guy with me. I only had to deliver one baby. It scared the heck out of me. And I only had to help deliver one baby. I was just there to assist. So there's all sorts of stuff you face out there. And the education is necessary, but the hands-on training is more important. And frankly, it takes longer to get them trained in the township because we don't have as many calls, right? To get the hands-on training. So, that's part of the concern in my mind is even if we can get 7 on staff within the next year and a half, what do we do in the meantime? And how do we get them the experience they need to really be proficient enough? So knowing what I believe I know now and the circumstances that have evolved, whether it was this thing that you talked about as being improper in November. Yeah, the timing was terrible. The image was awful. Everything about that was not good. But that doesn't change the fact that we've lost our fire department. And we've got a 6-month contract that is about to end. And that's only staffing one of our 2 stations. And from the beginning, I've said, can we get the same or better service than what we've had by staffing each station with 1 person? 1 is a lonely number, but 1 person in each station, and then relying on paid on call to come and fight a fire or provide CPR or do whatever has to be done at an emergency service. I'm 73 years old. I could need medical services in my home or any place in this township sometime in the foreseeable future. I'm satisfied that I'll be as well or better taken care of by doing what is being proposed. And I don't necessarily like it either. And I know a lot of our board members don't like it at all. And for some of the same reasons that the doctor talked about a few minutes ago. Because we still do have an ongoing issue with the city. But I think we got to get past that, and we got to get past nitpicking the dollars and cents and say, okay, what can we buy in services that are as good or better than what we've had or what we have right now? And we'll have for at least the next year and a half, 2 years, if not longer. And put that and provide that service now, as I said. So all of that other stuff is stuff that's happened, rightly or wrongly, and we can criticize ourselves, and these folks have. And made admissions of, yeah, that wasn't well thought out and well done, maybe, and well perceived. But you got to understand that not everything goes to the citizens. We get elected to this office. And frankly, the buck has to stop with us. We speak as a board, not individually.
I get that, but if I can't trust you, I can't vote for you.
And that's fine.
I happen to trust you personally. I know. But I don't know all the rest of you. And if I can't trust you and I can't get a decent answer on why it's a good idea to do that, nobody yet has said why it's done that way. And in which case, I recall every one of you, someone give me a darn good answer as to why it went down that way. Because how am I going to something happen in the future?
But I will say this in response to what you said, is that people were offended and people were hurt, and they're hurt now. And I get that. And that's part of what this is all about. But decisions have to be made on ultimately what's the best decision. And unfortunately, there's damage that happens when decisions are made that changes something and how it goes. But there's ways to resolve that and compensate for that. And that's all I can say. I would want to say about that. I'm not.
We'll
I'm just telling you where I.
So I just want to make
Steve.
a couple comments.
My father likes it.
I'm a pretty optimistic person. And I think we can rebuild this department. I think we should. It has nothing to do with the city. But I think I'd rather have more resources than less. More people responding than less. You know, and I always look at it, if it was my grandmother, would I want a first responder? Would I want somebody getting there, even if it's a minute earlier? Yes, yeah, I would. Yeah, the uniform really doesn't mean much to me, but you know, we can provide more than we do. And we have an obligation, I think, too. And the city has to come regardless because of the county millage, which is great. So we know they're coming, but we should at least be able to provide something for our citizens. Maybe, you know, where we're at currently, we can't operate the way we are, but at least, you know, get as many people as we can to run some type of outfit for now. And let's come up with a plan for the future. Nothing happens overnight. Yeah, we're down, but we can get back up. All the paid on call, all our staff, they haven't left. They're still in this community. But when you see a board up here that doesn't support you, I don't blame them. If I was in their shoes, I would do the same thing. I mean, I love my community, but it is hard. You don't have the support of your board, that's hard. It is demoralizing. It's lives that we're messing with.
So many times.
And you treat people the way you want them to treat.
So we can all make our statements, but we'll do so in an orderly fashion. We haven't gone through everybody yet, Ms. Dwight, but I appreciate your enthusiasm. Is it right?
I would just like to comment since I mean, this has been wearing on me for months, and I know I'm not the only one, but it's constant. It doesn't leave. It's all day, it's night, keeps us up at night. I
Weekends.
mean, it's constant. We can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. It's just constantly there and it's constantly on your mind. And, you know, I think, oh, this sounds good to go this way. And then, well, you know, then this sounds good this way. And I just have to truly just make this decision from my own heart. And I prayed about it and I do feel that there were mistakes made along the way that just for example of, you know, when we did decide to advertise for full timers, paid on calls, you know, they weren't done in a timely manner. You know, you should advertise, you should schedule interviews, get the interviews, do the background, you know, make the offer. Those were not done in a timely manner. If they would have been more organized and in a more timely manner, we could have people.
Would you add clarification to that last point though? Because, and we should be the burden bearers as the board and the end game.
You're asking me for
But are,
clarification?
yes,
As far
why,
as,
why was there such a delay? Because we do need to actually be fair and honest throughout this entire part.
that was left to the chief to schedule the interviews, you know, do all of that. I mean, I know the clerk assisted with placing the ad. And it was very frustrating when it came time to do interviews because things were never, it's like, okay, schedule them on certain days, you know, back to back, so we can do it and it would go on for weeks. And then when it would get scheduled, the person wouldn't know that they had an interview or
they thought it was live and it wasn't.
yeah, and it just was it was embarrassing. It was very embarrassing and it could have been done. And that's why, you know, and I did become a part of the meetings with the chief and the communication, and this is what we need to do.
Step one, two,
Step
three.
1, 2, 3, and write this down, and then, you know, okay, do this, this, and this. I mean, we did our best, and I know, and then going back another time, it was like, okay, the next meeting, well, where's the list? Where are the things that we were gonna work on? Well, then the list got lost. They lost the list. But it was like, I just really feel like I have tried, and I'm not the only one that has really tried to help this process along to get people. And I still feel like we could get people. But it would have to be, I think, the world of the city. I mean, you guys are top notch, but I'm still outweighing things in my head and still saying my prayers, and the answer will come to me. But I am looking at both sides and what's best for the township and what can happen. And that's just coming from me. So.
The podium is open for any new speaker. Otherwise, we can maybe start polling some people.
Good evening, everyone. Laura, I completely appreciate the statement of being exhausted about all of this. Seeing as though the FOIA emails happened, the first tracing was in July of last year. Look at this, almost a year into this process, and here we stand. Because it's, you know, I'm not convinced, and I really, really wish you three gentlemen would please convince me of why this is the best thing for us to do. I have spent hours in ad hoc. I have dug through finances left and right. And again, I will say it. I don't know everything. Don't claim to know everything. I don't. But I still have not been convinced as to why we as a township should throw $400,000 at you for a fire response. Because really and truthfully, the ambulance you get paid for. We should not really even calculate that in. So 400,000. Bill, this one's for you. Presqu'île, the contract. And I hear you did wonderful things up there with rebuilding for their paid on call. Was it $400,000? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you. I think as a taxpayer, I would support just a paid on call department in this township rather than paying $400,000 for a fire response with ALS that they are saying as an added service. And it's not. You are responsible for that for the county. And I understand that, and I do appreciate it. I'm not really sure that there's a lot that I can say that I haven't already said that might change your minds or sway you one way or another. I am not convinced that this would be the best thing for your township constituents. The other thing I would like to just read, part of an audit response or audit dated in August of 2020. The accuracy of the township's financial reporting is compromised due to the lack of capital asset detail, as well as failure to analyze and timely amend the budget caused expenditures to exceed the authorized budget, which is a violation of Michigan statute. This is this board. This is the work that you do. We can do better. I think that there's a lot of things that you have done better.
I will comment on that. When I came.
Can
on
we
the-
stop the timer then?
No, I.
That's fine.
Okay.
When we came on this board, things were a mess.
Can't disagree with you. I
mess.
know, and that's why I said you
And
have
we
done a
have
lot
done
of good
a
things.
ton of work.
Not
And
saying
of
you haven't.
course, you know, audits used to be $500. We came on $10,000 to get them done correctly.
No, they're just 14,000.
Yeah, and I mean, they are done correctly. You get findings at the end of your audit. Those go down every year. They used to be here for 2 weeks. They're here for 3.5 days now. Yes, there's things standing. Those comments for the capital asset and the
Mhm.
amendments, that is from last year's audit.
It's
And
dated
we-
August of 2020 and at the
Because
March
our
of 2020.
Our audit is not done yet this year.
Correct.
Which our fiscal just ended July 31st. You know, I mean, things are brought up, budget amendments have been more timely since then. And capital asset list, we know that that needs to be done. And that is something we have reached out to our auditors. We're trying to find someone to do that. And it's not, this doesn't fall on just me.
No,
Or
it's
just-
the
I mean,
board.
It's all of us.
Yes, I agree.
So it's like, yes, these things need to be done,
Mhm.
but in my opinion, you take a list this big and you get down to a list this big, it's getting better.
It is getting better. I'm
And
not saying that it's not.
constant work And it's constant, just keep checking them off the list, keep making things better.
To my point is, if we don't even know what our financial assets are, but yet this contract talks about assets, how can we say what our
You can
assets
take
are
it,
and what our
Steve.
assets are?
Yeah, let Steve take that.
Yeah.
So, and yes, you can stop the clock.
I'll stop.
Yeah. You know, we talked ad nauseum at the ad hoc committee about transparency,
Mhm.
how important it was for transparency to tell the whole story.
Mhm.
I wish you'd tell the whole story,
Which would be,
which would be the Gatsby 34 is what you're talking about. Are you familiar with Gatsby 34?
not off the top of my head, but I welcome education.
I am. It's a government standard that was enacted in June of 1999, long before anybody was on this board. What you're talking about is an infrastructure capital asset. Pipes, lift stations,
Water department.
water department sort of stuff. Nothing to do with the fire department.
But as a
Nothing
whole,
to do with the fire department.
but as a whole,
Nothing to do with the fire department. So you criticize this board for this action. When the law was enacted in 1999, 22 years ago, and the accounting firm that a previous administration hired didn't do their job. And it just keeps rolling forward. This board is absolutely aware of this Gatsby 34 and have to take remedial action to correct that. We have started that ball rolling. So please tell the entire story. You've criticized us many times for that. And I'm not getting, I don't, you come to the podium suggesting that we have somehow defrauded. And I take a great deal of offense to that.
I am reading word for word what the audit
Then you
said.
need to read what the rest of it
It's
says.
a much longer piece of.
Then you
document.
need to read what the rest of it says. I've educated you on the Gatsby 34. I recommend you read more about it. But until such time as that law was enacted, no municipality had to keep a list of any of their capital assets, period.
To my point, what the whole thing was, the fear, okay, the fear, if we don't even know what assets are, but yet how are we going to say what our assets are if we end up dissolving, whatever the word is, this contract? How are we gonna know that? Of what is ours, what's theirs, how?
That finding has to do with the water department. It has to do with the pipes underwater, the lift stations. We know what assets are in the fire department.
Okay.
We know what vehicles we own. I don't know if we know where all the, all the gear and stuff is, because it's been signed out and there's no, I don't know if there's a record, we've asked for it and haven't gotten it.
Robbie had just said that they would catalog all the
Right, but I
assets.
think you'd have a hard time cataloging our log, the stuff that the paid on calls haven't returned. And I think
We've
Nathan's
been
been
asking-
asking for 4 months
March 3rd. was
and
the
have
first
not
time
been
I
able
asked.
to get a list from our department.
You'll remember that conversation at the ad hoc committee as well. That at the ad hoc committee,
We've had lots of
Is-
conversations. I'm not really sure exactly which one you're talking
I'm
about.
talking about the turnout gear, I'm talking about the paid on call, I'm talking about getting those lists.
Correct.
You were there. And so we've asked for it, trying to obtain it.
I'm
But
not
but
saying.
I'm not, I don't, you brought up the Gatsby. I needed to clarify it because I don't like when somebody puts me personally in a position where my integrity is in question. I don't like that a bit.
As Russ said, you're a board. It's not individually directed at you, Steve.
Your Facebook post sure was. Anyway, enough said on that. Start the clock.
Consider it started.
Okay. Referring to the actual contract itself, number 3, the contingency. Your words, we're in financial trouble. It's not just the fire department. We're in financial trouble as a township. So what are the exact specifics and strategic plan for that to occur, to build this contingency fund? Do you have that laid out already?
Well, if you'd like me to address that, since we've, so in the guise of the contract, 5-year contract, starting at 400 to the 4th year, where the multiplier of 2% would accrue to the cap of 475. We, as of last year, our tax collections for the 1.5 operations millage collected just over $560,000. Those are millage monies, which would have to be separated from anything else and put into a savings account for it to roll over. So strategic plan, save any money that we can possibly save. Make the improvements to the buildings if afforded that ability. Have we sat down as a board and laid out a 3 or a 5-year strategic plan? I think we have to take steps towards that by all means. But we're here having a public input session because we've said from day one that we're going to do that. But do we have, we haven't even moved forward with the contract, let alone how or what we're gonna do and spend money or not spend money. The contingency in part 3 is solely for the fact, depending on the 8 years remaining on said operation millage, to make sure, as any municipality should, that there are reserves depending on whether a millage passes or doesn't pass for operational needs and for the potentials of advertising and going back towards a secondary offer of a millage.
But you won't have extra funds, because you got $150,000 and it's gonna follow that 400,000.
So we can also clarify that, trustee Kroll, the 109,000, which has been an ongoing topic of where is this money? That is an auditing function for the overhead that any department in a building would have. That 109,000 has never been paid out of public safety, nor has it been reimbursed to the general fund. Am I correct in that statement?
Correct. It's an additional general fund contribution.
For the one station. Because there is line items for
For
one of the
south-
other stations.
For
for the-
south side, there's
Okay.
line items.
So that's just one station though. Okay. But the other one has been coming out of the fire department budget.
Yes, their utilities and stuff.
Okay. Other question on number D under the draft. 2-person ambulance and then is that 4.5 staffing, full-time staff? What is the specific skill mix and why is that not specifically designated there? It just says two-person.
Because it could be one paramedic and one EMT, or it could be 2 paramedics.
Okay.
And the staffing that every day.
Okay, but that's the minimum because of licensure for the ALS is at least 1 paramedic.
So you do have now 30 seconds left.
Hey,
with all the
look at that.
pauses.
Under the 5.6, does this exist, the memorialized in writing by a separate instrument? Does that document already exist? And that small repairs will be required, handled by the city personnel. Is that per occurrence, per year, per 5 years, per contract? It doesn't designate. Do you see where I'm talking about? Under 5.6, under A,
Chief Bush answered.
I'm sorry,
Per occurrence.
per occurrence. Thank you. And does that separate instrument already exist?
No.
Because there's nothing purchased jointly at this time.
Okay. All right, thank you. Good luck.
Well, by all means.
Thank you. First off, a little education. I've heard a number of times that the ambulance is already paid for, so we don't need to pay for ambulance. Okay, could you run a countywide all ALS ambulance system on $940,000? Would you do it? Would you have enough paramedics, enough ambulances? Could it be done? The answer is no, it cannot. It can be done cooperatively with another entity who also puts money in. The $4 million budget that the Alpena Fire Department operates under is 24% out of the city general fund, 23% out of the county ambulance millage, less than 1% out of the ECHO program. If the township contract happens, it will represent 10% of the overall budget. And 42% of the budget is from ambulance billing. As ambulance billing reduces, if we don't meet our goal at any given time, then the city contribution goes up. But the way that you run a 30-person, full-time, professional, progressive fire department and countywide ambulance service is not on the county's chunk or the city's chunk or the billing chunk. It's on all of the chunks working together to make an organization big enough and equipped well enough to be able to meet that objective. It can't be done on any of the smaller scales if you want to serve the whole county. Now, let me give this my best shot. Deflection and distraction are a couple of skills that are used if you're trying to make an argument, and it's useful to talk about things that aren't related. Audit reports and the gas fee are not related to whether or not we do this fire deal or not. They're distraction. When the November meetings happened, which were poorly timed and could have been done better, I apologize. They apologize. We all agree that wasn't a good thing. Well, we heard the public. They were absolutely clear. Almost everybody at the microphone said, we want people in our stations and we want no loss of response time. This program gives you twice as many people in your station and exactly the same or better response time. The deal would include 2 people instead of 1. It would include ALS instead of BLS. It would include a fire officer certified individual at every station all the time So that under my OSHA law, you have a trained supervisor over every emergency. My OSHA law requires that a fire department have a trained, certified supervisor commanding any scene. And if you have one station responding first, that person is going to be on command, is going to be in command initially. Now, here's a problem for you. I hate to have more problems for you guys. In order to be a fire officer one, you have to first be a fire instructor one under NFPA 1021 and state law. A fire instructor one cannot take the course until he has 5 years as a firefighter two. So if you came out of the academy and you have not been a fireman for 5 years yet, you cannot take the fire instructor one class. And until you have that fire instructor one class, you cannot be a fire officer one. If you are not a fire officer one, it is not legal for the township to send you as the supervisor commanding the emergency, even temporarily. Am I correct on that? Thank you. Additionally, in addition to having the right staff, and how you're going to do that in less than 5 years, I have no idea. You wanted me to convince you, so there you go. You have access to a 9-person shift of full-time professional firefighters and a paid-on-call component, which will have to be rebuilt because the first one disappeared. But we'll make another one. How can you do that? We don't believe you. Did I do that in Presqu'île? Yes, I did. I have 21 people in Presqu'île that are doing one heck of a job. If we can do it there, we can do it here. You also get a full-time training officer, a full-time CRR officer, and an NFA certified executive fire officer, the best of the best of fire chiefs. Now, I don't like to toot my own horn, but yes, it is a higher level. Lastly, you get a 150-year-old department and all of the specialized equipment that goes with that. More than just 2 stations with a couple of trucks in each. Now, a three-station department with a plethora of specialized equipment. And most importantly, if we do this, what are you going to use the money for? We're going to use the money for a number of different things, but one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to invest almost $100,000 a year. And that's a cost that we don't already have people on staff to handle, to build a technical rescue and special operations component that has never existed in Northeast Michigan and will now. Technical rescue, confined space rescue, I got my list there, water rescue. And by that, I don't mean ice rescue, I mean water like in the bay, in the lake. We don't have Coast Guard here anymore, so it's a problem out there. Rope rescue, high and low angle, we're culling off water towers down into sinkholes and so forth. We don't have that capability. There's nobody to call for that. We don't have a confined space entry team here. We don't have a trench rescue team here. We don't have an advanced extrication and stabilization team that can deal with building collapse, structure collapse, machinery rescue. We have no off-road capability other than the sheriff's department, who then takes our people in. What if we could have people that could handle all of those rescue disciplines in Alpena Township, or in Alpena City, or anywhere in Northeast Michigan? It is possible through cooperation. We can't afford to do it, we never could. You can't afford to do it, you never could. Nobody else around here is nearly as big as you or I, so they certainly can't do it. But together we can, and we can end up better prepared than we ever have been. Now, as far as convincing, I'm not on the township board, and I'm not a real good math person. I hate math, but I'll tell you what. You levy 1.5 mil for fire protection. You levy 1 mil for general operations. What the ad hoc committee says you need is at least 800,000 and probably twice that. What the ad hoc committee said the minimum was 800,000, which would have been all of the fire millage and damn near half of the general fund. How are you going to run a township if the only thing you pay for is your fire department? And what are you paying for? One guy in this station, one guy in that station, and some paid on calls. We could give you twice that for less than half the money. It makes no sense to do it any other way. Thank you.
Members of the board. Podium is open. If nobody's going to step to the podium, we can start. Do you have a list of yes, Ms. Rich?
I'm Jerry Rich. I live on Partridge Point in Alpena Township. I'm not prepared, but I've been taking notes and I've got a few questions, but I will have you answer all of them at the end. Starting off with why everybody left. That was a question and it was answered by the crowd. Rats flee a sinking ship. When they don't have the support and respect of their employers, employees leave. So that says something that the people that left must have felt, that they felt a need to leave because there was not support, maybe from the community, maybe from the board, maybe from their bosses. I'm not sure. Something you should ask yourselves. Okay. Another thing is you talked about the BS&A accounting coming in 2018.
We got it in 2017.
2017.
But we separated, we took public safety out of the general fund and put it in its own account in 18.
All right. And somewhere somebody said that talks about the fire department problems started in 2017. Something to consider is that when the accounting came in, the talk started coming in about what you guys were going to do. And then I also have notes on the population of Alpena City and Alpena Township are relatively the same, correct? Yet you have a $4 million budget and we're going to pay $400,000 for ours and they're relatively the same. You guys have a lot more money to work with than what we do. So you talked about inefficiencies that were done. Why can't we solve these inefficiencies? That's a question. And maybe keep our department. Cash Kroll has talked about wanting to keep the department. How about not a full contract where we say, hey, take everything, we're going to dismantle our fire department. How about saying a partial contract? We need to borrow some of your people for a year or two until we can get the people up and running that we have your chief and 7 to fulfill a full staff. It's just an idea. And then, let's see. With the population being relatively the same, like I said, I'm not really prepared. The geographic area that Alpena Township covers is a lot more extensive than what the city has to cover, maybe, I'm not sure.
Very different.
And then, oh gosh, I've got notes all over the place. The city pay scale. I don't know what you pay your officers and what we pay our officers, but maybe that would be something else. If we were to borrow somebody, just something to put out there because I'm not sure that the pay scale is equal. So probably not with a $4 million compared to 400,000. Not, probably not. So anyway, that's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Address the geography, most of the rest is financial. In terms of geography, you're right, the city is about 9 square miles. We handle like every other community in Alpena County, probably 95% EMS calls and 5% fire calls. Enforce data for Alpena Township shows that over the past 5 years, the average number of working structure fires is 7 per year, which interestingly is about the same as in the city. Since we both have similar populations, that makes some degree of sense. Since 1980, 40 years ago, the Alpena Fire Department has responded to every medical emergency in 1,700 square miles of Alpena County. So moving from 9 to 125 is not a problem. Already go on 90% of the calls. The only differences are the fires, which are in the single digits.
And I would like to start with the conversation piece that these discussions started in 2017, Ms. Rich. The issues that have been ongoing with the fire department started well before the Raymond Robson, which was a joint study done in 2012 with the previous board and in a partnership at that point in time with the city to discover the feasibility of a combined consolidated emergency services. And it goes well beyond and pre-2012 of very similar issues. You can dig into the minutes of as far back as we have of constant concerns, constant issues. And it does. We won't disagree. It doesn't bolster a proper communication channel. But part of that failure as a board, our communications should be funneled through a chief. That being said, there have always been some lingering issues back and forth. And to the paid on call and the staff, we, at least myself, I'll speak simply for myself as I should, for that failure of communication and that angst, I apologize. But a lot of things were lost in translation and a bottleneck in communication. That doesn't make it any better. But that is the reality that have been dealing with. Anybody else would like to? Yes, Russ.
As always, right? Thank you for your comments and thank you for obviously paying attention here tonight. And I will try to talk louder. I'm sorry. Apparently I don't talk loud enough. My wife tells me that too occasionally. Why did everyone leave? Each of us have probably did our own, I don't know if you'd call it an investigation, but effort in that. Part of it's paying benefits. As you pointed out, the city's budget is a lot bigger than ours, and they can pay better than we do, I believe. There might be somebody shaking their head no, so maybe not. I don't know, but that's part of it. But I will tell you that not me, but some of the board members here, I believe, have talked to some of those that have left and went to the city. And I think they have positive opinions about this concept of this contract for services. The city has a larger budget by far, like you said, 400,000 is 10% of their budget. But do you know how much taxes they pay in the city compared to what we pay in the township? I lived in the city and I paid as much taxes there on a house that sold for about, well, the house I bought was about 2.5 times the value of the house in the city. And I paid the same taxes there that I pay here. Okay. And talking about taxes, you said something about borrowing money. The money we get, we borrow, we levy from the citizens, from the taxpayers. And nobody's real excited about asking for higher millage. But I will tell you this, that if this board decides to continue to try, and try is the major word here for me, but try to rebuild this fire department almost from scratch. There's a few things that have to change, but one of them is going to be millage. And so there will be, on the heels of that vote, there will be a motion to levy a millage now to increase what the fire department millage is, to allow us to get to a funding source so that we can be competitive and that we can get, in my opinion, more staff than just 7 + 1, and to get and pay for training, on-the-job training at other departments so that these people can become proficient more quickly. Well, those all cost money. We don't borrow to do that. We ask you to help us pay for that. Steve said twice what we have, that would be 3. I think it's 4 mills that would have to be levied total, including what we have now. So another 2.5 mills to make this department viable for reconstructing. And that's, based on looking at the numbers, I believe that's what we're looking at. And so I don't think we can borrow money to do operations. But we have to get it from millage somewhere. And we also want to provide the other services. Part of this job ends up being, what is our capability of providing services at the most efficient way to do it and the best possible way. We could have a total paid on call system like they have in Presqu'île, and maybe we'd get enough people to staff it. You know, a chief and then everybody paid on call. It might be a lot less costly, but again, we still have to staff it and train them and pay for that training and find them within this community. And not everyone comes from Alpena Township. I recognize Mr. Ginter's not a citizen of Alpena Township. He's a citizen of the city of Alpena. But he is paid on call. And so, you know, well, there's some hard decisions to be made here, and we're prepared to make them whichever way it goes. But the citizens have to march in step with us, or we can't do what you're asking us to do.
Can I make a comment to yours?
Absolutely.
A millage before the people would let their voices be heard.
Absolutely.
Say yes,
Absolutely.
Then you
Definitely.
don't have to make a decision. The decision is made for you by the people.
And we can do it that way, and we probably will if we go in one direction. But do we need to try to match the city's operation, or at least some portion of it? We'll never match it. Or do we, or not raising a millage, do what makes sense to a lot of people, which is not trying to duplicate services that are already in place.
True.
Michelle.
Not duplicate services, which leads me to the technical thing, technical rescue. I think that a lot of those things that you said were technical rescues are provided by the state. The state has a lot of people that train in a lot of those areas. Yes, it might take them a little while longer, but how many of those technical rescues do we need? Have you actually had to call someone else in on to respond to things? The sheriff's department has guy out there for this voting that you mentioned. Find spaces.
Rescue, yeah.
Rescue. How many of those have we had? Do we, I mean.
How many fires do you have? How much fire protection do you need? You only have 70 a year. Does that mean you only need 3 or 4 guys to call it good? No, you do for what might happen, not what will happen. You can't do it on call volume in a rural community. And yes, the state has some resources. They're called Michigan Task Force 1, which is part of Michigan MABUS, and it rolls out of Holly. City of Alpena is a member of Michigan MABUS. The township is not yet. We can call upon them and they certainly will come help. But at that point, it's recovery, not rescue. Will we do something? Absolutely, we will. Are we properly trained and equipped to do it well and properly? No, we're not. We're going to do the best that we can. But the state has no responsibility in local first line emergency response. It's a local responsibility. Local government has to do it. I'm sorry? Okay.
So Ms. Rich, just to keep on par, because I wouldn't want anybody to feel that they were slighted. Ms.
You
Black.
commented on pay scale. And our pay scale begins at $11.98 an hour. I'm very embarrassed to even say that. It is hard to recruit people when you're gonna pay them $11.98 an hour, when my son was stocking shelves at 18, making $14 an hour with no responsibilities. So our pay scale is not attractive for people to come here.
Can I ask a question? If you would like to come to the podium, Mr. Muggy, that would be wonderful.
Tim Muggy. I've been with the fire department for 20 some years. I'm in the fire service for 44 years. The pay scale thing was a question that I've been on the fire committee with for a long time, questioning. You all know that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I heard that I requested a $3 an hour increase, and you were willing to give 3%.
We didn't know that you requested $3. That was not communicated to us.
And it
We-
wasn't, and it wasn't communicated in any timely manner. So that obviously is a frustration from your standpoint.
And
when-
well, that must be a misunderstanding then. I wasn't aware
I
of
think
that.
there's a
but-
lot of misunderstandings that go from the board to getting to the fire department staff.
Right.
I don't think there's a clear, direct line of communication that gets what we say to the fire department.
Another question is, before all this started, before it was even brought to our attention in November, we requested as a fire department, you board members, any of you, to come into our department and work with us and see the everyday operations. Why did nobody come in?
Mr. Muggy, I can say that I did.
I was
So-
asked once by Lieutenant Tolan to do an ambulance ride. That is the only thing I was ever asked.
I was never asked.
Because it's frustrating, because after the fact, we requested any one of you to come in, come to a fire, see how we operate.
Never.
I mean, you, in the beginning, were fighting fire.
Yes,
So you were involved in the beginning of that.
I guess I don't know, did someone tell you that we were invited?
Someone, and I also requested anybody to come over there because there was a lot of questions on the everyday operation, what was going on over there.
I don't. I
And
was never asked.
Tim, I've never heard that.
No.
Well, it was probably before your
but,
time,
You know,
before your-
I'm past the mandatory retirement age, so's Norm, so we probably couldn't get down from the truck if we got up on it.
Not get on the truck or anything.
Well, okay, that's for me, Norm. not for you.
But go on.
High angle rescue. There's an opportunity for high angle rescue. There you have it.
But yeah, that question came up, because after the fact, we heard other people going to other fire departments and seeing how their operation went. But the question was, why are we not seeing how our fire department runs? That's all I have.
And Mr. Muggy, can I start by saying, thank you for your service. Thank you for always being the one that does, in a professional manner, vocalize your concerns. And I understand your frustration and honestly share it, because we have concisely communicated certain things that obviously were not passed through to employees. And employees are the ones that make everything happen. We know that. John, Tim, assets, Ms. Kozibowski, asset. But when we communicate through the proper channels and those communications aren't properly delivered to you in a timely manner, or yet best at all, of course, there's going to be a communication breakdown. I was, for myself, yes, I was an active member of the Paid on Call. I won an election in 2016, and I was asked, should you, and let me paraphrase, are you responding as P10 or are you here as a supervisor? Because we don't want one of you. I joined the fire department to be of service, and you're an exemplary aspect of joining a fire department and a Paid on Call to be of service. I understand your frustrations. I think everybody that's worked hand in hand with Chief share your frustrations, because how can we communicate to full staff Paid on Call in a clear and concise manner when we have an administrative function that has been given a plethora of tasks, information to be disseminated to employees that never came to fruition. That's frustrating on our end as well.
Well, I was on the fire board, internal fire board for what period of time. And talk about frustration is when, after November 6th, less than 48 hours, we as the fire board had no idea what was going on behind the scenes And we're gonna dismantle this fire department. You want to know why morale went down the tube? Right there is why morale went down the tube.
And
You can only get kicked so many times.
And Mr. Muggy, I think that we all, I can personally just say, there were errors. Inherently, there were errors. But we're here today to look at what our options are, simply, and not confusing it, not muddying up waters and discussing water in this. They're obvious. These are huge concerns for not only the board, but every resident that has to pay into these. But this is the opportunity to look at what options are available for emergency services that remain.
I don't disagree with any of this merging, or I don't so-called merging, whatever, with the city.
Contract for service.
However you want to call it. But if that would have been brought forward in a timely manner prior to an election, I think there's not a one of us that would disagree with that situation. That's all I have.
Tim, I would just like to comment that I don't, again, I'm just gonna say, oops, I'm sorry. I was never asked to go on a call or do whatever, but there were many times. I mean, Michelle and I both have gone over and talked to chief, and one time, Tom Tolan was there. And we're asking all these questions, like about the gear and about this.
Oh,
and about
that's
that.
great.
I mean,
That's great.
many
We
times.
do.
So it's
do our
not like
research.
we have not shown any interest, or, I mean, we have. I mean, and maybe you haven't seen that or heard that or whatever,
Well, yeah,
but,
I'm not there all the time.
but I mean,
Like,
but we have.
Yeah.
I mean, and because we do want to learn about this or that.
Yeah, when we were ordering equipment or buying, we
Right.
always went over there and said, explain to me what the purpose of this is, how
Right.
it works. And we,
I mean, the
we've done
gear,
so much research.
right,
People probably don't even realize the number of hours that have been put
I
in,
mean,
because
there's,
you're not seeing it.
right, there's gears.
You're not
there's
in my
a
living
ton of
room.
gear, there's
Sure.
tanks, there's boots, it's like, it made me sick to walk back there and see piles of thousands and thousands of dollars of stuff. Let's organize it, let's figure out, if we don't need it, let's get rid of it.
And there again, a lot of that stuff's outdated, and that's why it's back.
But we need to
Organized.
organize.
Why
it.
do we have it?
So, but, and that, we have been trying.
Thank you,
Tim, I may say something.
Yes.
First of all, thanks for your service. I did work a little bit on that fire board with you, and it was a pleasure working with you. You always kept a level head. And I was asked to come and ride with the fire department, spend the 24 hours with them. I was ready to do that. I got my wife, I said, that sounds pretty exciting. I want to see what really goes on. I said, be a big job for me getting out of the truck like.
We'll get you out of there.
But the thought of, as that was happening, there started to be some tension between this 2-inch wall. It turned into a 20-inch wall, and it kept getting thicker. And I says, I don't need to be riding with tensions that are coming between this board and the fire department. And to say what they were, whatever, it was always something that was going on. And I just said, no, I'm not gonna do it. And yes, I did go to other fire departments in the early days. I wanted to know more about fire departments, but I went as a managerial, can't even say it, to learn how the fire department was operated as far as budget and where it came from. I did that on my own time. I did get paid for one trip, maybe two, one. I wasn't looking for that, but I was trying to get information. I even took the chief with me to one of them. We spent quite a bit of time over at Gaylord talking to their chief, trying to learn about it. Came back, and what was done or where it went, I don't know. So again, thank you for your service. And before the second round comes, I'd like to say something before you second round.
I have
Thanks,
one-
Jim.
something to add to what Norm said. I too have talked to different fire departments since this all started, because I didn't want the city's opinion. I didn't want our fire department's opinion. I wanted someone who had nothing to gain or lose to get an unbiased opinion. So I have talked to 3 or 4 different fire
And we have.
departments. Yeah, and we've done our research. And sometimes it is reaching out to other fire departments, because everybody's got an agenda or a motive. And I wanted to talk to people who didn't have any skin in this game.
Right.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, you too.
Or is there any other first time? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Matt Guys from 1310 Hobbs Drive in Alpena. I just really have two questions. What is the appropriate staffing size for the Township Fire Department? And what is the appropriate staffing size of the Alpena City Fire Department? And how are we structure that department? I'm more of a curiosity and it just would help calm my fears.
I can answer, I think on our side, everything that we've learned, read, and have been told by a labor attorney that solely deals primarily in fire departments. For a community of our size, we should be staffed between 7 and 9.
And 9 is 9.
Yeah, 7's the low end, but 7 to 9 is what.
9 would be optimal. That's
And
9 plus a chief.
Yes.
For a community of Alpena's size, for just fire protection, in order to meet the 2 in, 2 out guideline for interior attack, and in order to meet the national NFPA standards for fire ground staffing, 1710 or 1720 for full-time or paid on call respectively, the minimum that we could do with is about 24 in Alpena. We
Total
couldn't do it on
full-time?
total full-time people on staff.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
Not including.
Not per
paid on
shift.
call.
Does that include command staff?
Right, we, in order to meet NFPA 1710 or 1720, 1710 is for full-time departments, 1720 is for paid on call or volunteer departments. The standards are different and are a bit more relaxed on the volunteer side. Oh, I'm sorry.
Chief Forbush, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So the staffing size you just said, was that just for the city of Alpena?
Yes, in order to meet
So
the
what-
standards in the city of Alpena,
So
that's
what
what we
would be
believe
the
is
standard
necessary.
for a combined city township?
Oh, we're already in excess of what it takes for us, and we're simply moving assets from one location to another. So I think the 30 personnel that we have now are completely adequate. I wouldn't go any lower than that, though.
Mr. Guys.
One
Yeah.
additional question, how many per shift do you have? Like, how many are on staff, like?
Each shift,
active
yeah,
on the
each shift starts, or each shift is comprised of 9 firefighter, paramedics, or firefighter EMTs. The minimum we start the day with is 8. So at any given time, there are 8 full-time personnel on duty. During the week, during the day, 8 to 5, or 7 to 3, or whatever, there are 3 more of us that are added to that number and called in at night as well, but the minimum number is 8.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That raises a question. May I?
I'm sorry?
That raises a question. I'm still trying to talk louder here. So if this contract were put in place, then you're putting 4 out into our township.
Mhm.
Would that add to the number you have to staff per shift then?
No. The way that we do it now is we have a minimum of 8 personnel on duty. We have 3 ambulance crews with 2 people each. So there are 3 ambulances ready to go out the door at any given point, and then a couple of more people for fire operations at any given time. As each call comes in, as soon as we drop below our minimum staffing, we start calling off-duty personnel to maintain that level. So the first call goes out, we're probably good. The second call goes out, we call in 2. The third call goes out, we call in 4. So that we've always got at least 4, preferably 6, available for the next call. That's why we have 6 ambulances instead of 4. We only have to have 4, but you really need more than that to handle the volume. Not with the on-duty people, but with the off-duty people as well. So what we're doing is we're taking of the 3 ambulances, we're taking 1 and proposing to move it to south side, 1 and move it to north side, leave 3 or 4 people at headquarters, and then call in whenever it starts to expend that number of people. So it's a rolling number. Even though we start with 8, we always maintain at least 4 to 6, no matter how many calls. And that's a dynamic process. You could probably speak to it better than I could.
Yeah, it actually is very dynamic. And I can add that in my 25 years at the fire station, we've never not been able to take a call. because of the call volume. And we do have mutual aid that we do activate. They come closer in case we need. You guys remember the John A. Lau fire? We put other outside agencies on standby. That was a probably once in a lifetime event. So we were strapped, but in the process, we did, I believe, pull 4 calls in the middle of it that we handled while we were doing that major operation. So we've never not been able to take a call. So keep that in mind. It is a very dynamic process. We try and keep our staffing up as much as we can to fulfill all the needs of the call. We have the option of being able to call everybody back in if we need to as well. So we do that on any structure fire. Any structure fire that we have, if it's a working structure fire, we do a full department call in and get as many people as we have. We're looking at a mutual aid agreement with the air base where they would provide a rapid intervention team crew of 2 to 4 people based on their staffing. That's our safety backup crew. So one of our guys, and we have had it happen at least twice, where we've had firefighters go down or be lost and have to call a mayday. They are actually our emergency rescue crew. They come, that's all they do. So in a lot of times, probably our average for structure fires, you're probably looking at minimum of 16 people. And if we had the air base, you're talking 20 people that would be on scene to be able to mitigate that. And we do drop EMS calls. We're in the middle of a structure fire. EMS call goes, we take the EMS call. So.
And we backfill it with additional personnel.
And focusing back on the contract that's proposed, then your intention is to have an ALS ambulance at each of the township stations.
That's correct.
Correct.
And 2 personnel, 24 hours a day. Are they always there? No, to be on a call. But the idea is to erase the borders between the city and township and move assets where they need to be to cover the need at the moment. And that is not a new concept by any means. That's normally how the fire service does it. You don't duplicate it every square mile. You move back and forth where you need to cover the need.
Russ, I'll add real quick. So a lot of times when we have a structure fire and in the north side station right now, in doing this in the 6 months, we really have had no hiccups or glitches at all. I think our service to you guys has been above what we ever expected for one. Our fire response on most times is 7 to 9 personnel, sometimes 10 or 11 based on who's in the station at the time. I will tell you with that crew, as soon as they drop boots on the ground, they're ready to go to work. They don't have to wait for anybody else before they go in and effect a rescue or put water on the fire. When you're doing a 1-man station, you technically have to wait for 3 more people to get there before you do anything other than life safety rescue. So keep that in mind. When Ms. Banks asked, what am I getting for my buck? How long can you hold your breath? How long can you manage 400 degrees all on your own? I can tell you it's hot. And I can tell you from pulling victims out before, it's not fun. It's not easy. You don't have time. So keep that in mind.
Leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, Rob. I was aware of that, but yeah, that can't always get, you have to have 4, I think you said. Yeah, that's what I was aware of. Thank you.
Is there anybody online that would has a question or a comment? If so, please shoot a text or raise your hand so that we can acknowledge you.
You might not be able to see that. Can you see the raised hands so that when you've got the
Oh, yeah.
toolbar down at the bottom? Okay. I thought you had to go to full screen.
Well, then that would offer an opportunity.
We do have the one letter that was dropped off. I don't want to be the one who reads it. I'm not good at reading. So, Russ.
Thanks a lot.
It was between you and
I think
Steve.
you finally figured out
Norm's the
the
oldest.
distance from the microphone.
This is from David and Susan Skibby. As Alpena Township residents and taxpayers for over 45 years, I'm supposed to talk louder. We have watched many years of turmoil for the Alpena Township Fire Department. It has always been evident there were too many chiefs and not enough Indians that had any comprehension of the financial accountability owed to the taxpayers who fund the department. In keeping with your format for this session of questions and answers, This is our question. By contracting with the city of Alpena for fire and EMS services, will we as resident taxpayers be getting a higher level of trained personnel for less cost than a standalone township department? If the answer to the above question is yes, then considering that the highest demographic of township citizens are retirees, it only makes sense to give us better service without raising our taxes. If the answer is no, then there needs to be a thorough retraining of the current fire department personnel. If we're allowed a second question, it has been previously reported that the city of Alpena Fire Department would hire the remaining township fire personnel and provide them with higher certifications and training. Is that true? If so, why are the remaining few township fire employees so resistant to the idea of improving their skills? Thank you for working diligently to try to provide this essential service at a price that's affordable for all of us on a fixed income. I can read into the record that address if you want me to.
I don't think we should. Read the addresses. That's personal information.
That is also a change to OMA. You only have to state your name at meetings.
Oh,
No longer
okay.
your addresses.
We used to ask for addresses.
Yes, until this past year. That was a change. With that being said, is there anybody online that has any comment? I'll throw that.
Well, are we gonna respond to any
Oh,
of
well,
these
yeah.
questions?
Well, first,
The
there's-
first question. um, By contracting with the city of Alpena for fire and EMS services, will we as resident taxpayers be getting a higher level of trained personnel for less cost than a standalone township department?
Yes.
If the answer is yes.
Kind of convoluted.
It is. If the answer is yes, then considering that the highest demographic of township citizens are retirees, it only makes sense to give us better service without raising our taxes. The second question was, it has been previously reported that the city of Alpena Fire Department would hire the remaining township fire personnel and provide them with a higher certifications and training. Is that true? If so, why are the remaining few township employees so resistant to the idea of improving their skills?
To my knowledge, there are 4 remaining township employees at this point. 2 of them have been hired since this whole thing started, so they weren't here in the beginning. In the beginning of this project, we offered employment to any employee of yours that was not previously an employee of ours. And 3 of them took us up on that offer and we hired them. The remaining employees, 2 of them are new, and we can't continue to hire people that are new. And the other 2 are former city employees. One is on our pension, so we can't hire him as a full-time employee. And the other was a former employee as well. He's not retired, but he's not eligible for rehire.
Was there anybody online that has? If not, Norm, did you have?
Before you go to the second round.
Oh, wait. By all means, sir.
You know, tonight, there was a lot of information, there was good information, but there's one thing that I didn't hear a whole lot about. I did from the city, safety. We got over 9,000 citizens, I think somewhere in that area. So I wasn't hearing how the citizens are gonna be taken care of when we've got this loss of personnel. We're down to 1 station, and we're trying to rebuild our station, and the ad hoc committee said that we should rebuild. I asked a couple times at various meetings, could we have a plan on how this can be done? Is it with a part-time? Is it with a full-time? What will it cost? How will it be done? And how long will it take? I don't remember I think we got a couple answers, but the fact that I'm concerned about is our citizens out there right now, they're getting good service. But if the city leaves and we don't have something in place, and we don't get something in place to help build whatever we're going to build, our citizens are in jeopardy. The ambulance part of it, that's still covered by the county, but they still got to get there, and our fire department. So I think we need to look at and remember the safety of our citizens. How are they gonna be taken care of? How are they gonna be serviced? And when that fire truck pulls up there, I don't care what label's on the front of that door. So it gets there. And same thing with the ambulance. So we need to think about that. And I think Russ had mentioned, are we getting the same services for the same amount of money or more or less? But all of that comes into play. Think of the safety for our citizens.
And nobody's still online? Then by all means, this is, if there's a second comment or question, please stand to the podium.
I have two comments, probably because they were made in reference to the previous board. And one is on the township, serving as a fire administrator. I wanted to give a breakdown of how many people were working at the township in the fire department. We had 6 full-time captains, which were full-time pay. We had 30 paid on call. And when Alpena Township went to medical, they went to, the township board allowed me to hire 6 medical personnel. So that was our, plus I was the administrator. So that was the full complement of our team. The other thing I wanted to compliment is Mr. Lappin on the Gadsby. Alpena Township did do all of their due diligence on their water lines, everything. And there should be a book in the water department because I used 2 fire personnel to do that book. I know more about towers and water lines and cost and whatever than anyone could imagine. And I also did the asset levels on all of the other assets in the township, including fire department equipment. And I used to turn all the township stuff into you as our insurance agent. And you should remember that. You got our asset levels. And now the water department one, that was turned into the water department, but there was 2 copies made. One went to the Alpena Township's, it was their attorney. I mean, not their attorney, it was their water department head, which was Gary Johnson. And, you know, he was the one that did all the,
C2A,
pardon?
C2A.
Yeah, Wade Trim. And then there was another copy, there were 2 other copies made. One went to the fire department and one went in that office. So it was on the bottom shelf. So you might want to look for it because those documents were made. And I wanted you to understand that they were.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand it. It was the texture of the comment.
Right, I
And
know,
so-
and it was done by legislators, not by Alpena Township trustees, because we did do it. The only one that would do it was me, and Lynn in my office did all the typing on it. So I know they were done.
Yeah, and no, I understand that. And that-
Okay, I just didn't want,
Yeah, the
you know, when
auditor-
you
the-
throw
the
something
auditor-
out there, it made it sound like I wasn't doing my job.
no,
And
no,
I got
no,
news for you, I
Uh,
did do my
Yeah,
job.
quite the contrary. The auditor didn't do his job.
Yeah.
And that document.
And it's like the water and sewer. The outside taxpayers that's not in the water and sewer system do not pay anything, but it's always kind of said that, well, you know, the taxpayers are paying all this money for attorneys. Landholders that have water and sewer are the ones that are paying that. And is it a lot? Yes, but maybe sometimes the end result might be different.
I guess my only rebuttal to that is after almost a full year of our current auditing firm requesting from Campbell and Associates, who used to do the books because of a cost savings measure. By legal standard, auditors are supposed to share said documents. That document does not exist anymore.
And that was.
We've discussed the
That-
finding
that
that Ms.
capital
Banks had
asset.
spoke about that's has nothing to do with the fire department, that is water department assets. It doesn't exist. So if you know where that's at, that would be wonderful.
Well, I would be willing one day to come here and look and show you, because the book wasn't in there, but you should be able to attend, to be able to obtain it from, it was from a fire department. I mean, I don't remember the name of the company. I mean, I've been out of here
Yeah.
several years already, 6 years, so, but I didn't
Anyway,
do that.
appreciate your comments.
Yes.
Yeah.
podium. Yes. Yeah.
I'm Bobby Sue Kozibowski. I live in Alpena Township on Wall Avenue. My husband was a captain with the Township Fire Department for many years. He was also paid on call. I had no intention of speaking here, but I have heard so many half-truths. It's sad and it's scary. I've heard people say they weren't aware that the township went in to the firefighters and told them 2 days prior that they were taking the city's contract. It was a done deal. And that was it. That's what Karen Vance refers to, which is when I started the Save Alpena Township page. That happened. The township had folks there and said, this is what's going to happen. Get on board or get out. So the fact that Mrs. Vance was made to feel that didn't happen is sad. There are board members on this board who I have talked to personally several times. One of them told me there was no prior knowledge 24 hours before that happened. That was a straight up lie because I FOIA'd the paperwork, as you two well know. I have time cards that tell me that person lied straight to my face. I'm not going to name names. You know who you are. I appreciate the time that you give to do the job that you do. I don't appreciate the non-transparency. I don't appreciate Mr. Lappin belittling Miss Banks for bringing up something that was published publicly on a Michigan government site. All you needed to say was, Miss Banks, that was about the water department. You didn't need to belittle her. I have heard you, Miss Palovich, belittle many people, as well as Mr. Skibby. Mr. Skibby has belittled you on camera and voice-wise. This is unacceptable. You people are all going to sit here and pretend the fire department tore itself apart. That is horse pucky, and you all know it. We had very well qualified, very educated, very well-trained captains and lieutenants and part-timers and mostly full part-timers. Those people are all still very interested, as am I. My husband's been dead nearly 7 years. I have tried to back away from the fire department because, you know what? It brings back memories that really affect me. My daughter's been a member of the fire department for 15 years. It saddens me that many of you don't know that she's a paramedic. She is not just a paramedic, she is a critical care paramedic. She has been on your payroll 15 years. She gets a phone call in last week that says, oh my God, you did an internal audit and we don't have all your paperwork. Wonder whose fault that would be. Oh my God, we don't have your baby's social security number for the insurance. The baby is 8 months old. No wonder she's getting $1,800 bills for a well baby checkup, because no one here followed up, but you all say, I did my due diligence. I beg your pardon. This did not happen overnight. This happened over years with no transparency, with arrogance and ignorance. Ignorance being you didn't know how the fire department ran, and you did not take the time to go and bother to look and see. You took someone else's word for it. Shame on you. Your life, your mother's life, your child's life, your grandchild's life depends on those personnel, whether they be city or township. But the township has always been a family and has always taken care of its own. And I'm very sad to say that after all this hubbub and hullabaloo, I have lost some very dear friendships, very dear. I looked at one of the city's personnel as my secondary son. He was in my bed with my husband and myself when he died because he wanted to be there. And you guys think it's no big deal. No big deal. It's emotional. You damn right it's emotional. I am now on a fixed income. You're talking about giving away things that I have worked just as hard as many others have for years. And then you have the arrogance to sit up here and pretend the fire department tore itself apart. Not true. And also not true is the fact that those guys left because their salary was lower. That's crap too. And we all know that. Many of those guys had 20 or more years in. John Clements has been on that department for God knows how long. Okay? Bruce was there for how long? Tom Tolan thought he had the gods filling his pockets when he got hired at the fire department. They're all gone. They all loved their job, just as you do, just as you do. So please stop making the people feel like it's their fault. Please stop bullying other people for having a different opinion than you. All opinions count. Everybody's got one. Some of them don't. Other ones are great. But don't make people feel like they're not important, because they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuczynski. So you did point out one thing, Ms. Kuczynski, and that goes back to Ms. Vance. Yes, and I was confused. I didn't know exactly what you're talking about, but there was a meeting. I believe trustee Polly and myself attended that meeting when we talked to staff. I didn't know. So for a point of clarification, I just want to make that known. I didn't know what.
I'm so upset about is that to her point, his point, the only reason this fire department, it probably physically as in money wise, maybe needed to be sucked up by the city anyway. That's fine. I can concede all that. But the way this was handled absolutely stunk. It was disgusting. And it never should have been. And the idea that this fire department, and I don't have anything to gain by it. I don't have any skin in the game. But I don't understand why they weren't notified. I think it'd still be intact. It might have eventually had to go by the wayside, but they left because of what happened that day after election day. And we all know it. If you pretend like it just happened in a vacuum, it's ridiculous. And that's what I take as a voter and a taxpayer, the most exception to it. Well, it just happened. They all just walked away. They didn't because the whole reason it ended is just what she said. Because of what happened after election day. And I would be happy with I'm sorry, that really stunk and we shouldn't have done it. Then I could probably move on, but I haven't heard that yet. I just hear all this flutter around it, but nobody will say it stunk.
I think we all have said that it was probably the worst thing that we could have done.
I think we have owned it. that
We've
the
owned it.
rollout could not have been worse.
And we as a board have changed how we do things now, even to the extent of negotiating in public, which is abhorrent to me as an attorney trying to negotiate contracts, because I don't want to do that. But what do? It happened. Okay. The members of this board who were here then, and I was almost here, I attended that meeting in November. Had nothing to do with it and didn't know what was really going to happen until I got there and saw what was going to happen as it played out. But the point is, I'm not trying to whine, and I'm not trying to not take responsibility. The responsibility is to do this job right now. And how you fix it when you're offended by us as board members is vote us off here.
Well, and that was for my points.
Yeah.
Recall, whatever, but I would love for everyone to Bob's point, heavens, the only reason this fire department is disbanded is because of what you guys did, and nobody will phone that. You know, just stop, start, your own, we should have done this, we should have rolled out this way, we shouldn't, we won't say, holy cow, we wrecked this and we're responsible for it. That's what I would like to hear.
We do accept some responsibility. We cannot accept all responsibility. There is also an administrator that should accept equal parts responsibility. Everything does end at this board. And I think in one way or another, we've all tipped the hat to saying it was rolled out poorly. If there's one thing that we can all agree on, it would be that fact. But to get back to Mrs. Kujabaski's point, Murray and Steve, could we not have sidebar conversations? Because I would like to address this. It's been told that all we've done is give half truths. I would actually mirror that by saying a lot of half truths I've read on a social media site that aren't exactly true. And maybe that's where some feathers may have gotten ruffled by the way things have been presented. It's a two-way street. Communication is also a two-way street. Now, we as a board are the end game. We understand that, but communication is a two-way street. We've had failures. It wasn't solely, and I won't say that it wasn't an exacerbating part of some of the demise of the participation. Obviously, we're all humans. We all have some inherent reaction. But to sit here and listen to all that we've said today and throughout this entire process is give half truths is far from accurate.
And I didn't say that, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Have any of you on the fire department apologized, or whoever was in control of this, have you apologized to the fire department and township and say, "God, you guys, I'm just really sorry, we should have talked to you and involved you"? Has anybody apologized? They're hurt, they're angry. I think they're doing apologies, and taxpayer, it would go miles if I heard you guys say, "That sucked and I apologize." They're your friends, they're your coworkers, they're your neighbors, they're your counterparts. I just don't understand doing that to them when you're not. And thinking it was me, that's my biggest thing, is it doesn't sit well, that's not what we do as loved ones to each other.
Number one, if I may.
Yeah.
Number one is there's ways to apologize and there's time to do it. They did the verbal. Okay, I'm satisfied that the city and the township regrets how that meeting played out and how the timing and the notice and the lack of prior information played out. We're trying very hard not to do that again. You got to understand that there's certain things that are allowed by law to be confidential. And some of that is in terms of certain types of contract negotiations and so on. Because as I said, I was uncomfortable a while back, not too long ago, talking about negotiating a contract in a public forum, but that's what we're doing. So, you know, that was never done before. I can tell you that, I never say never, right? So I don't know that that was done before, but I came here tonight with the intention of not throwing anybody under the bus, and I'm not going to do it. But there's more to be dealt with here that are problems with this department than this board. And that's all I'm going to say. But there's some things that need to be fixed if we're going to rebuild this department. And that doesn't need to be made public now. There's no reason for that. It has nothing to do with the decision making. But it will be decisions that might have to be made. There's also ways to apologize to people through compensation. That is in the back of my head. So just understand that there's, and of course, as far as the paid on call, their jobs are still there. If they choose not to respond and don't want to work for the township or the city on behalf of the township, that's a choice everybody can make. That's the freedom they have. Well, but is that a reason to make a decision here? Is that a reason to make a decision on a tough call on how to provide the best service for our township, given the circumstance? It happened. It happened. How do we fix it? Those folks aren't all going to come back to us. None of them are going to come back to us, frankly. So how do we fix it in a short term, but in a way that, as Mr. Foley asked, how do we protect the citizens of this township? And right now, we can't do it on our own.
Communication needs to happen and forgiveness needs to happen.
I believe you had a
Yeah,
comment.
ma'am, I'll actually address it a little bit. So when we kind of, if you will say, took over in January, we had 2 meetings with personnel, with paid on call staff. We had 2 meetings. That's where we basically brought them in. We tried to include them because I need people engaged in this program because it is important as paid on calls. We invited them 2 different meetings. That's where we basically found that we had 12 responders that were willing to come. In subsequent training sessions that we had, that fell off. And Tim, you can speak to that. We had 1 training session. Tim was the only one that showed up. And then the next one, there was nobody. In the meetings that we had with the paid on call, we tried to give them as much information as to how we were going to include them and use them in this process because we still needed them. And we pleaded to them to be a part of this. We were brought in to get this operationally for 6 months so your board could come up with something they were going to do. Realistically, right now on the north side, we've had no responders. We're trying to engage them. They're welcome to come and still be involved in it, but they got to make the commitment. I can't force anybody. What do you mean? That I can't answer to. All I can answer to is what our actions were from the city standpoint is we tried to fix it. By fixing it, we tried to include them. We tried to show them a path of where we were headed with this from our standpoint to make sure that they were maintained and important in the roles of this. And I think these 2 gentlemen here, Abby was there as well. I tried to engage them. Chief tried to engage them to say, listen, we need you guys. We want you guys to be a part of this, part of the solution, not part of the problem. And since then it has fallen off. I don't know why. I don't have an answer to that. But what I can tell you is we still need those first responders. Every township in the county needs those first responders. They're a key part to this. Because realistically, Bev, you mentioned going to a paid on call, all paid on call. Do you realize how long it takes to go from your house to the station, even emergently? Tim, where do you live? I'm gonna guess it takes you 4 minutes to get here.
To the north side?
To the north side.
Oh.
Okay, I'm using.
Right now, take longer than that.
Okay, so.
South side is my normal side.
Okay, but if you're a north side, if you're relying on paid on calls, I'm using Tim only because I think I can pick on Tim. I've known Tim a long time. So say 5 minutes, and then it takes you another 5 to 7 minutes to get to the fire. Again, how long can you hold your breath? Everybody references the EMS part of it. Great. We're already doing the EMS part. Fire doesn't have time. Realistically, it does not have time. You need people there now, not 10 or 15 minutes. And heart attacks, most of those can be prevented, Marie. Realistically, we have preventative measures as paramedics. Yes, when somebody goes into cardiac arrest, yes. However, we're fulfilling that need. Those needs still need to be met within your township. And right now, we need the paid on call to do that. No matter what the board's decision is, for people to not respond and boycott this, I think it's wrong for me personally. Now, I understand people have things going on and they can't come. I understand that, but not on every call. We need those people re-engaged. I don't care what's happened before, but if the project goes forward, whether or not you guys decide to do something different or you decide to contract with the city for services, we still want those people to be involved. We want them to be engaged and a part of it. That really is our plan. So when you ask, why aren't you involving them? We're trying to involve the paid on calls. We really are. I can't fix the rest of it. I can fix what I have within my control, and that is it.
I think
think there's two forms of involvement though, and I appreciate what you said, and I will verify that what you said is true. You
Sure.
definitely included us. I don't think she's referring to why are we involved with you now? I think she said, why were we involved in this process? That's the second
Okay.
thing. I think we might have missed that.
Sure.
I don't know
So-
why that we've been consulted, and I am stunned with that. I still are.
Is it Mr. Bowling?
I guess you're stunned that we made a mistake. I'll be the first to say we definitely made a mistake. I was involved in that. Yes, I'm sorry that we did that. What more can we do to get over this hump instead of beating this horse to death?
Well, you know, that goes a long way, because what you've done now, this is my first meeting I come to COVID. But I have waited this whole time to have somebody say, that stunk what we did to our fellow firefighters.
It did stink.
And I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate your apology. I love to hear it from everybody, because it stunk.
I think we've all said it, but the fact is, we've said it, we want to move forward. How do we get over this bridge instead of beating this horse to death? We got to move on for the safety of our citizens and bring this fire department back to working with the city or working on our own. I don't know where that's going yet, but we need to get the protection for our citizens. And that's our most important part right now.
I agree, but nobody's gonna trust you if you want to apologize. to
Then
the person.
recall us. Do what you got to do.
Yeah. So this, I would just like to say, this is something that we said we're going to do. I thank everybody for coming out and being very professional and polite with minor exceptions. But that's to be expected. We're talking about a subject that is near and dear to everybody, whether or not directly related or just a recipient of the care. This is a hard decision, but part of this board's duty is to be financially sound. And love it or hate it, it has to be a conversation that happens. And there's never a good time to have a discussion of this nature. Once again, I've apologized once, I'll apologize again. I agree. I think we all agree that we've learned the mistakes of the recent past. It doesn't probably mean a ton in terms of a full apology, but we are sorry. But here we are months downstream. And my primary focus is giving the citizens the best service that they can get and still having the means of operating within the millage monies. This has been, we've basically kind of run over. Everybody's had, there's no comments online. Everybody's had an opportunity that's present. But that doesn't mean that you can't email us. You can't call us. Ms. Vance, if you would have called any time over this whole COVID thing, I would have told you probably the day after the November Aplex meeting.
You know what, I was on social media, I'm sure you all read, probably what I wrote at social media and the state of Alpena Fire Department. Every time my biggest hang up was, this calls for first and foremost an apology.
And you're getting it here tonight, ma'am.
And then I think if it had come a little more timely, they probably would just present.
I am not on social media. I don't plan on going on social media. It's something I don't totally agree with. So any other communications, my phone number is in the phone book. I have a card. You can come here and call here. They know my phone number. I welcome all phone calls. If you get my voicemail, I return calls. Please don't hesitate to call.
So any closing remarks by members of city? Board? Would, you know what, Mr. Ginter?
Come on up.
Why
Yeah,
not?
let 'em-
Do you have a question? Because we would like to kind of figure out either a comment or a question.
Chief Orbush knows that I spoke about discussion because there's not really any discussion. If you're controlling the narrative, then it's just your opinion. Magically, the city talks about having technical rescue. Like what? Now, just magically because of the takeover? Then Michelle or Laura talked about misunderstanding and they still exist. Well, what was the purpose of the whole time meeting with the chief if you didn't accomplish anything? What was your goal? What was the?
That's
what was the
very
purpose?
good.
That's a perfect
Too.
question.
Yeah.
So oddly enough, you had you had Chief Robbins on staff. He's continued to be on staff, but you find him so inadequate. Was the chief part of the Human Resources Committee? Is there something you needed the chief to be involved with that you could not accomplish if he wasn't doing what he's supposed to? I mean,
So you wanted us to do the chief's job?
you're the Human Resources group.
I'm
Why
not-
don't
I'm
do
not the
human
human
resources stuff?
resources.
Well, okay. Then there was some talk about, you still have mutual aid. What I think we should do today is just finish the connection with the city. You're going to be understaffed for a little bit, but oddly enough, you lost focus on the
So then
hiring
would
process.
you be responding as mutual aid from CRTC, Mr. Ginter?
I don't know what you're referring to.
You just mentioned mutual aid in response.
Mutual
So
aid from Wilson, mutual aid from Sanborn, mutual aid from Long Rapids, mutual aid from Maple Ridge.
Yeah, those are municipalities.
Yeah, and we
But I'm
we
talking
have
about your
mutual aid
employer.
agreements.
Yeah, but your employer as well.
What employer?
You're not employed by
Alpena- I'm
CRTC?
here at Alpena Township.
And you're not
I'm
involved.
I'm not sure what you're making reference to. But
Okay.
if it's convenient for
Okay.
your discussion, then feel
Well-
free to banter back.
Trying to add some
Why wasn't the
clarification.
equipment millage held off until after this thing got figured out? Why did you commit the citizens to almost $1 million in capital equipment for the fire department when you knew there was something in the midst that could be handed over to the city? I find it either this equipment is sitting still and not being used except for township runs, or the city is using it. You spent all this money, you basically were disingenuous to the
Well, our chief is
taxpayers.
supposed to,
So the bulk of the top
I
population
don't
is in the city.
understand what your point was
Yeah.
with that statement.
Mr. Ginder,
Why did you spend the township taxpayers' money for almost $1 million
On
when
what?
it's not going to be used?
On the ambulances and the fire engine?
Exactly.
well, it's still not stopped.
Why did you not stop the fire truck purchase when this was going to go to the city? Why didn't you hold
No
it
matter
off?
what happens, we need a fire engine.
And
You
that
have
is-
fire engines.
The decision wasn't made.
yeah. So, Mr. Ginter,
Yeah, thanks for the 3 minutes.
yes, you're welcome.
Yeah.
First and foremost, once again, thank you for your time this evening. Do not hesitate to reach out
To any of us.
to any of us. We have learned the mistakes of the past. We've done everything amazingly beyond a transparent level. Some may still disagree with that, but when we're actually negotiating in an open session, I think we've met that standard of transparency. But to continue down the road, we will continue to do so. Maybe not negotiating in an open session, but we need to, first off, I think everybody at this table, everybody that's present, our primary concern is the safety of our residents.
You can't shut the door here.
You can't
shut
shut
the-
it. Yeah.
It's an open
But-
meetings act.
But that, with that being said, please
law.
email, please call. And if there's nothing else to be said, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion and
Who
support.
supported it, Norm?
All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose the same. Meeting adjourned at 9:17.